IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Happy Friday, everybody. It is March 7th, and I can't believe we're already getting into the second week of March already. Time's starting to fly by, but that just means we're one day closer to spring practice. We're also one day closer. I got to do some prepping over this weekend. Lauren's birthday's on Monday, so I'm going to have to make sure that we get everything buttoned up for the wife's birthday on Monday, so I got to get some dinner plans organized. That also snuck up on me. But it is Friday. It's the end of the work week. I'm sure that everybody's ready for a much needed weekend. I don't know about you guys. This felt like a long week for me. It's been pretty busy. Brian's still kicking it back on vacation. I know that he's going to start his trek back to Indiana, I believe, over the weekend. So he should be back next week, and we'll be off and rolling once again. But today, Mr. Davis, we have the Friday free-for-all mailbag. But before we dive into everything, how you doing today, man?
I'm wonderful, man. I'm excited about the mailbag. It's always a good time with Irish Breakdown Notre Dame fans. Of course, this is my fourth show with Trev now. So we're starting to get on the roll.
I know, man. We're rolling. We're starting to gel a little bit.
Oh, by the way, Trev, if you guys haven't, go over to irishbreakdown.com. Trev has put together some fabulous pieces on breakout players and going into the spring. The one on Kingston, I think he just posted, was absolutely amazing. Good bang. I'm enjoying what you're putting together, Trev.
Appreciate you. Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Brian set us up really well before we got on vacation. We got some good content coming out, and we're taking deep dives into the team and what to expect going into the spring. We're talking about expectations for down the road, and I'll have about 4 or 5 more coming out this weekend just about different players that the team's been adding. So definitely hit up the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Check all that out in the Champions Lounge. So before we get started today, Sean, before we do hop into the mailbag, I did want to talk a little bit about Mike Martin's press conference. So that went down yesterday, and it was a week after Notre Dame officially announced him as their new general manager. There have been reports coming out, but you know Notre Dame, they take a while to officially announce and get through that process. And so Mike Martin stepped up to the podium yesterday, and I'm sure a handful of you guys saw it as well. Sean, I know that you watched it. What were some of your initial takeaways from the new GM's initial press conference?
Well, first of all, after he got through the nerves, you could tell he was extremely nervous at the start. But once he got through the nerves, I thought he was very impressive. And one of the things that stood out to me when he talked about evaluation and his background as a scout, I'm very interested in seeing how Notre Dame always has to do things differently than the powers that be or your top tier programs that are public schools. Notre Dame being a private school, of course, with education always being at the forefront. True example of student athlete, even in this time of the NIL era. That's what they represent, and that's what they want to represent. And so him talking about that, representing that, and continuing to understand that Notre Dame is a special place. And I love the fact that he continued to talk about fit. And understanding that when you go out and evaluate, I'm not just evaluating a player on tape, I'm evaluating character. I'm getting to know that individual. I'm getting to know his family. I'm getting to know his teachers, the administration, the principal, everyone that's connected to this young man to make sure that he's a right fit for Notre Dame and for what Coach Freeman's vision is. I thought that was also vitally important. And just that's what really stood out to me, Trev, when he talked about those things, the understanding, and then also echoing what we heard from Chris Ash and Jawan Sider as well, just how charismatic Marcus Freeman is, just meeting him and talking to him. And when you hear that, you feel like that the program that Marcus Freeman wants to build and his plan and his blueprint is literally the rope that everybody else pulls on in that building, in the coaching rooms and in the player locker room. So that gives you a really good feeling about, uniformity moving forward. Carter Allman, he got promoted to director of recruiting. So now we have a pretty good idea of what we're going to be working with in recruiting moving forward, even if they add to that in the years to come. But I love hearing from Mike Martin and what he said yesterday. I think it spoke well to him understanding Notre Dame, but also him representing what Notre Dame needs to do moving forward as far as evaluation, going out, being a GM, and then calculate. I think it's 3 different seasons that the staff and administration take over, right? That is when you're closing, and then also when you have these spring visits and the official visits, because you have to customize. This goes to what Mike Martin was talking about. There's a lot of customization in these visits. It's not like you're just bringing everybody in a herd and then their visit all goes the same way. No, you have to make sure there are some higher priorities on visits, whether it's unofficial or official, and you have to dig into these kids and find out exactly what they need. What do they need to feel comfortable about spending the next 4 to 5 years here at the University of Notre Dame? And so that's when they come into play. And then they come into play also during the season, right? Because now the coaches and the players are focused on winning. Now, what are you doing in the season to stay in contact with these guys, getting them to come up for game day visits, and then also right before National Signing Day in December, and then right into the portal. Those are the 3 particular seasons where they really show who they are and their value to the program. I mean, they show it throughout the year, but those are 3 in particular seasons within the calendar year where you really start to see, administration, Mike Martin, Carter Allman, everybody that works in that part of the program come to the forefront. And I think Notre Dame did an incredible job coming away with him. I think they're going more towards, in my opinion, I think they're going to be leaning more towards, and they can do this because they do things differently, more towards an NFL style of evaluation, setting the board, communication, things of that nature. But talking to the 26 kids, Trevor, the coaches are very much still the head of communication, right? And so we probably will get a couple of questions about this, but I like what I heard. I really did. I really did. I've been there, man. I could just tell the nerves were like messing with him at the beginning. And it gave me a chuckle. It gave me a chuckle, right? Because that's just a part of human experience, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you were nervous trying to talk to a girl, like the first time you met Lauren, I don't know what that was like for you, like trying to ask her out for the first time. The butterflies, nerves, everything. Oh, yeah. Everybody has a human experience of something like that. And you could tell this is big to him. See, that's what I love. You could tell this is big to him, right? And he wants to make sure that he does the absolute best job that he can do, not only for himself, but for Marcus Freeman, University of Notre Dame. And he spoke well of everybody that he met. That's one thing that Malik Zaire told me. He said, man, when you visit Notre Dame, it's not going to be an experience like anything else. It's not like you're just going to the athletic building, meeting the coaches, seeing the athletic facilities, and then seeing the stadium. He was like, you're going to sit with father, you're going to go to the grotto, you're going to be looking at all types of paintings and thinking like, man, what in the world who painted this? You feel the gravitas of Notre Dame, and they allow you to feel the gravitas of everything that is Notre Dame. And you could tell he's already taken that in. So I love what I heard from Mike Martin and his presser.
You and I are in the same boat here, man. I thought it was very authentic, which I appreciated. You could tell the nerves were definitely there, and I can relate to that. Look, man, my first show with Irish Breakdown, I was making sure that I didn't sound too crazy, and I was so nervous. I think my first show was a Tuesday show with Brian. I wanted to make sure that everything that I was saying was, in the context of what we were talking about. And then just midway through the show, I started thinking about how my voice sounded. I didn't want to sound like some, the transatlantic radio type accent. You know what I'm saying? I got real in my head, making sure it wasn't, Notre Dame football is poised for a great season this year. I wanted to make sure that it wasn't all crazy.
Sounded like old school Kurt Gowdy.
I'm saying. And so I wanted to make sure that everything was all good. And you can tell that Mike Martin had a little bit of that when he first started the overall press conference. But then once he started to settle in, I mean, he went through about 5.5 minutes of thank yous, and it was cool to see. Yeah. Just, going down memory lane for him and talking about all the people that got him to this point. But overall, I loved his approach. It's very similar to Marcus Freeman. And the one thing that's making me more and more confident about all of the guys that he is adding to his staff they all share the same ideology. And I don't think it's because Marcus Freeman has to say, hey, this is how you have to think if you want to come coach here. Mm-hmm. He's finding like-minded individuals that share the same core values as him. When Marcus Freeman got hired, Notre Dame's media page put out the Freeman era video, and there was little snippets in there talking. It was his interview with Father Jenkins. And he was talking about when you come to a place like Notre Dame, you don't try to change Notre Dame. You let Notre Dame change you for the better. And a lot of those players, or a lot of the coaches that he's hired, have that same mantra about him. He talks about character and building relationships, and which is very, very similar to what Juwan Sider talked about in his podcast or in his press conference. Chris Ash touched on it a little bit and said, hey, look, we're a player-driven university. We kind of let them dictate where to go. It's up to us to kind of put the pieces together. But we, at the end of the day, are going to allow some of the players and the personnel dictate where we're at. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how it unfolds with him. I loved everything that I heard. I love that he addressed NIL and the transfer portal in his first press conference, because that was going to be a hot topic of discussion. But I think you're onto something about the NFL path and what that's going to look like. Because with the way that college football is starting to shape out, I believe that you're going to want to start finding players with NFL backgrounds. And I love the poll from the Lions. Dan Campbell has been one of the head coaches that have openly talked about, look, man, the combine's cool and all. I more evaluate the talent on the field. I watch the film. If somebody can play ball, then they can play ball. If I watch somebody perform out on the field, but they run a 40-yard dash that's 0.2 seconds slower than what people thought it was going to be, I'm not going to let that impact my decision on whether we're going to take them. If you're a good football player, you're a good football player. Through that, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Lions organization is completely turned around, and last year they went 15-2. No, I don't really think that that's that much of a coincidence. And so I love a lot of what Mike Martin said in his press conference. Some of his individual quotes is the first one who talked about recruiting and how do you look to attract that kind of talent. You know, he said, I'm a big believer in intangibles, so character will be a big part. I know here, being Notre Dame, there's so many people of character. If you don't have that, you'll be a little out of place here. I want to make sure you guys understand that the process for me starts with character. And I think that's such a big piece because Marcus Freeman has shouted it from the mountaintops that he's in this business because he enjoys developing young men. And he loves to see their journey as a person, not just as an athlete, which is something else that Mike Martin talked about in his press conference as well. And then somebody else asked him about, like, how does he plan to balance out the transfer portal with high school recruiting? What does that look like? And he talked about his experience in the NFL. Sean, to your point, he said, similar to my beliefs in the NFL, I believed in the NFL throughout my career that you build through the draft and you supplement the roster through free agency. That sounds really, really, I mean, it's basically identical to Marcus Freeman's belief when he says things like, we want to major in high school recruiting, we want to minor in the transfer portal. Martin went on to say it will be very similar here. We are in the development business. We're going to lean heavily on recruits and the guys we recruit out of high school. We're going to make sure we get the right people and the right individuals here. We will look to constantly improve the roster. We'll do some of that by using the portal, but we won't live in the portal, which I think it's very important that Marcus Freeman, we know how much of a personal game it is for him with recruiting. We know how much pride he takes in his recruiting ability and his staff's recruiting ability. I think the Mike Martin hire is such a good fit for all of those reasons, for his belief, his background in the NFL, and another aspect that wasn't really touched on in his introductory press conference, but now with the transfer portal, NIL, the way that it is, I think roster maintenance is going to be huge. Notre Dame has been pretty reactionary in the past couple of years. Now I think they have somebody in the driver's seat that's going to be able to be a little bit more proactive in maintaining the roster, not waiting to hear, okay, well, what does player A or player B need to stay here now that he has these offers? I think you're going to see a transition more into, hey, let's be the first one knocking on the door to talk to some of these players. And I think that NFL experience is going to be more than beneficial in the role that Mike Martin is stepping into, Sean.
I also love the fact that he took an indirect shot at all of the publications. Like, we don't care about your stars. We're not going to determine anything based upon your stars. And maybe that will ease Notre Dame fans, right? Buy, sell, hold. We had a question about Notre Dame having a consensus 5-star over the next 3 years in recruiting. Well, for Mike Martin, it's like it doesn't matter, which goes back to that NFL scout background, right? It's very easy. Everybody knows who the top 5 guys in any particular draft are going to be in a sport in whatever year. It's not hard to figure out. If I asked you who are the top 5 guys in the NFL draft right now, you probably can rattle them off pretty quickly, right?
Yep.
The work goes in after that. Where do you find the second, the third, the fourth round gems that can become all pros, that can become pro bowlers? That is what he was talking about as well, right? They still are going to go after their share of 5 stars, the Deuce Knights of the world. They're going to go after those guys. But it's not like, oh man, we didn't get them, now we have to settle. Notre Dame is no longer in the settling business when it comes to putting together a roster. That's of the past. We went through that in the 2010s. We're not there anymore. Now, Marcus Freeman is all about getting the best of the best. And is obviously, he wants to go after players that come from that lineage. They've been doing that. They just put out an offer to another NFL legacy. Number 1 linebacker, Cooper Witten. Jason Witten's son in the 2027 class. So it's like you already see the vision of what Marcus Freeman wanted, and it's continuing. So I love that he's a fit, like you said. Chris Ash, Jawan Sider, same ideology, same thought process. Doesn't feel like it's forced. Seems like it is a common ground for these men and Marcus Freeman and his vision for the program. So I'm super. When he said that about the publications, I was like, thank you. Thank you. Talk that talk. Talk that talk. Let everybody know we're going to go find the best of the best, regardless of rankings, and that's what we need to hear.
Well, and that's perfectly said, Sean, because in the NFL draft, you can't just rely on your first round draft picks being the heart and soul of your team.
No.
It's an all encompassing. Right? Like it has to be, yes, you have to hit on your first rounders. You also have to hit on your day 2 guys. And you have to rely on hitting on the day 3 and 4 guys to make sure that they have an impact on the team as well. And then you supplement through free agency. I love that Mike Martin talked about that because that is very similar to what Notre Dame's done the past couple seasons. Always looking to improve your roster is something that I loved hearing too. Because there are times where it is easy for a coach to be complacent, especially after you form relationships with some of these kids and you get into the spot where it's like, okay, maybe we just stick with the guys in the room that we have. Marcus Freeman, one of his big things is challenge everything. So it's making sure that you continue to improve your roster in the way that you should. It's making sure that you're always adding the people. And there's a good chance, especially now what we've seen with Notre Dame, there's a good chance that improving your roster is getting players more playing time that you already have there currently in South Bend. But bringing in somebody like Mike Martin, who has a background in talent evaluation, I think it's going to be awesome. It was really cool to see, too. Last thing that I'll add is just he talked a little bit about his background and what led him to this career path. And he was very transparent. He was like, I wanted to go to the NFL. That just wasn't in the cards for me. So I was about to take a job at Cintas. And coming from a sales background, I interviewed with Cintas. I was like, okay, talk to me a little bit more, Mike. Like, what's that about? And he was like, and then I got a phone call from one of the assistants at Tampa Bay right after they won the Super Bowl, asked if I wanted to be an assistant talent scout. And then from there, it just kind of took off. So it's really cool to see what somebody's journey is to get to this point and seeing somebody from that background really accelerate in what he does now. He was a huge part in the Lions organization turning around because his ideologies fit with what Dan Campbell wanted to do, which makes it a good fit for what Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman want to do. So I'm excited to see how it all plays out. We've talked before. I don't think his impact is going to be felt crazy immediately in comparison to a Jawan Sider or Chris Ash hire. But what I believe is throughout the course of the season. He'll have his chance with the spring transfer portal opening up relatively soon, here in about, a month and a half, maybe a month and a couple days. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he handles that, because it's coming up quick. But I think his impact is going to be huge for Notre Dame throughout, really the duration that he's here. So it's fun to talk about, man. Sean, any final thoughts from Mike Martin's press conference?
No, you just talked about it. His importance will be felt, in my opinion, immediately, because there are some visitors coming in that have some immediate questions. Trey Taylor is a 27 quarterback coming in. He'll be coming in, I believe, on the 21st of March for a spring visit, and he has 3 objectives. Like, there is no need to go meet and walk the campus. No, this is who I want to talk to. This is what I want to hear. That man. Answer that. There are some other people that need to come in and they want to see the campus. So things are going to be different. This is where him and the staff, this is where they make their hay. This is where they make their money. This is where they show their value. Setting up the official visits. Like these spring visits and getting kids on campus. We talk about that. Can you get certain kids on campus? That's important as well. If you can do that and then get them back for an official visit, now you're aiding and assisting the coaches and being able to go ahead, close the deal, build those relationships that you're talking about. So I think that's the impact. We'll watch for that. The visitors, official visits, how they stack up, and they're starting to build up more and more as the days go by, which is a solid thing because he's been on campus now, probably going on about 2.5 weeks, I think, something like that. So that's a good sign. But then also, you have to take into consideration that it's a long list of people that could come in and general manage coming off a national championship berth. Like if there's a class where you come in on as a general manager or get promoted to director of recruiting, you want to be coming off of a national championship berth. That speaks for itself. That garners the attention of the top recruits. And now their eyes are wide open to Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman. So, yeah, he came in at the right time.
Sure did. All the coaches that were hired, all the hires that were made this offseason, we're walking into winning situations. Mm-hmm. I sit back and think about it. And at first, it's always shocking because you never want to see these, some of these coaches leave. I don't want to see Al Golden leave. I don't want to see Chad Bowden leave. I don't want to see Dylan McCullough leave. But then you go and you sit down and you start talking about, okay, poor Juwan Sider. He has to come into a room with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young and Jabron Payne's coming back. Nolan James is coming in. Oh, poor Chris Ash. He has to take over a defense that has, 6 or 7 guys coming back from a starting rotation. One of the most elite defenses in the past 2 years in the country. Same thing with Mike Martin that you just touched on. So they were walking into winning situations. And so I'm really, really happy and excited to see what he's going to do when he fully takes over the reins in South Bend. We're going to find out pretty quickly with some of the recruits being on campus in the spring and with the spring transfer portal opening up here in the next couple of weeks. But, folks, that's going to do it for the first part of today's show. We wanted to break down a little bit of Mike Martin's press conference, give you guys more opportunities to throw some more questions into the chat, which I saw that we have gotten some. But we're getting ready to move on to the mailbag. But before we do, guys, please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. And as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Sean, to kick off Friday, to kick off the mailbag, looks like we have Brian in here. Well, he was in here for just a brief second, but we are getting ready to kick off the Friday free-for-all mailbag. And for anybody who this might be their first mailbag, for anybody who might not know how this works, all super chats get bumped up to the top if you have a question. This is for all of our listeners that tune into the YouTube shows and podcast shows on a day-to-day basis. This isn't just for the premium message board members. That's more the buy, sell, hold on Wednesdays. But we already have some chats started here. If you want yours bumped up to the top, don't be afraid to throw in a super chat. But John A1 was the first one in here, and he's going to get us kicked off today, Sean. He has a question. In 2024, Notre Dame attempted 27.8 passes per game. If I set the over-under at 33.5 attempts per game, would you take the over or the under?
I'll probably go under. I think early on, whomever, well, it depends. If it's Steve Angeli, you probably would flirt with that. But regardless of who the quarterback is, I think, all of them being first-time starters are going to have to lean on the run game and that offensive line that we expect to be a force. So that would be, the run game with big shots down the field. So now we're talking about efficiency. Big plays in the passing game, and then the run game, or that to complement the powerful run game that Notre Dame, we expect them to have. So I'm going to go take the under 33.5 and say right around 30 to 31. I'll say 30 to 31 is pretty much where I would expect the passing attempts to be.
I would take the under as well, because I do believe that it might potentially even be under 27.8 passes per game in the early stages, especially because it's going to be a new starter. And so for it to average 33.5 towards the latter half of the season, it would have to be above. And so that could mean one of two things. One, the passing offense really takes off, or Notre Dame is in a situation where they have to throw the ball 35 to 38 times in a game, which I don't really see that being a factor. Not with this offensive line, not with the running back room coming back. So I'm going to take the under on this one as well, because if we're talking about averages, I don't know if they're going to be attempting 27 passes a game to start the year. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be somewhere around like that 24, 25 range. There's a lot of supporting roles on this team. Now, one thing to consider as well is I think that the running backs are going to be involved more in the passing game than what they were. I'll take a look and see how many scramble attempts Riley Leonard had last season, because I think a good chunk of those will turn into dump offs to an Aeneas, to a J Love, to a JD Price. So that could factor in it as well. But I'm still going to take the under, because I think it'll be still under 27 attempts per game to start the year. And if we're talking about an average, they'd have to be throwing 36, 37 passes a game for it to average out towards the end of the year. So that's where I'm at. Now, it would be interesting to see, maybe they would be around 33 in the postseason, because teams will still continue to key in on the run for Notre Dame. I think that would be something that would be interesting. But initially, I'm taking the under.
Let's just say, hypothetically, your starting quarterback is completing 60 to 63% of his passes. That would put you, if you had 30 attempts, that would put you right around 18 for 30, 19 for 30, something like that. Which sounds, definitely if it's CJ and Kenny early, I don't even think you want that many attempts. I think 25 would be something you probably would be comfortable with the two youngsters, maybe a little bit more comfortable with Steve getting closer to the 30 range and taking more chances that way with him. But then it comes back to how are teams going to look to attack the Notre Dame offense, because they know these are first-time starters. So do you look to take advantage? Does Notre Dame anticipate certain things against Miami and look to take advantage of Miami early when Miami might be expecting a heavy run early in that game? It's going to be very interesting, all right, because you do have a quarterback room that is very familiar with the system. That is something you can say. You have guys that had a minimum, they've been in the system for at least a year and a half, close to 2 years going into that first game in Miami. And so you feel comfortable with them knowing, well, I take that back. Mike Denbrock came and they all got Mike Denbrock at the same time. So they're all coming in, going on their second year pretty much primarily in the system. But you still feel comfortable about that. It's not like you got a new OC that you're having to learn something new. This is what makes the competition in the spring extremely, in my opinion, interesting, right? Because there is no advantage here. You know what I'm saying? There's no advantage of being given NIL money in the transfer portal, or being a transfer guy, having the expectation or conversations that led you to taking the commitment or giving the commitment to transfer. This is, we committed to Notre Dame out of high school. We all have been in the same system and have known Mike Denbrock for the same amount of time. Hey, let's see. There's no advantages here. Let's see who wins the competition. Makes it very intriguing. But I'm going to go with the under for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you there. And if last postseason showed us anything, it's that Notre Dame's offense struggled to move the ball consistently when teams focused on shutting down the run game. You're going to have a different skill set under center. Loved what Riley Leonard did. His main skill set was not as a passer. He came on at moments, but it was always, came on in the second half against Penn State.
Right.
They had enough skill to have it only be a 10-3 ball game when Riley turned it on in the second half. Against Ohio State, they fell short. It's hard to overcome a 31-7 deficit in the national championship, and in the final, we'll call it 20 minutes of the game. That's when it gets turned on. And so early on in the season, I think that it's a pretty safe bet that teams will load the box and focus on stopping the run, no matter who's under center or quarterback, but especially if it's one of Kenny or CJ. So force Notre Dame to throw the ball, because over the last, call it, really 10 years, Notre Dame has had very spotty downfield passing attacks. If I'm game planning for Notre Dame, that's what I would do. Look, if you're going to beat me by X amount of points because you threw all over the yard, that's fine. But I know that this team and this program can run the football. If you lose to Notre Dame because they rushed for 200 yards on the ground, you were just meant to lose that game. But if you lose because Notre Dame has now added a new dynamic to their offense, so it's going to make this team really dangerous. That's why we're also excited about what this quarterback competition is going to bring. That's why we're excited about the receiving core and the tight end room and Denbrock going into year 2. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see what that looks like this upcoming season. Aiden Benami had a question in here. Any concern on the time it's taking to hire a recruiting coordinator? Not because we can't find a good candidate, but more so in regards to actively recruiting. What do you think, Sean?
It's almost like I really can't give a complete answer here. I don't know what Marcus Freeman is looking for. And I think I would much rather him take time to find what he wants than to settle and just get somebody that doesn't align with what he sees in his vision for the program. So, no, I'm not concerned because I trust, just look at his hires. I trust his hires. People didn't like the Al Golden hire initially. Turned out pretty okay. It's the same reception for Chris Ash from a lot of people. But, his decisions thus far have all panned out to manifest as being pretty good hires and pretty good decisions. So, no, I'm not worried. I trust his process and what he's thinking and the visionary that he is for the program. So, no, I wouldn't say I'm concerned about it. And I don't think it impacts the 2026 class. I don't. You can ask that question about 27 and down the line, maybe.
Sure.
But no, I think they're pretty good right now. I think they have a pretty good handle on what needs to be done in the present.
Well, to your point earlier, a lot of the position coaches are still kind of spearheading a lot of the recruiting efforts right now. We also have to keep in mind Mike Martin just got to campus. He's been on campus for less than a month. I'm sure that's one of, if not the top priority on his list right now, outside of the players coming to visit in the spring. But whoever the recruiting coordinator is going to be working under Mike Martin's umbrella as the GM. I think some duties will be split, but I don't think it's going to be like a co-type of deal where it's, you have Mike Martin as the GM and then somebody's a recruiting coordinator and they're kind of splitting hairs as who the leadership is. Everybody reports up to Mike Martin. And so I think that's going to be a factor too, letting him go through an interview process to see who he wants on his team. I'm sure Marcus Freeman is going to be an influence in that decision, especially because recruiting is kind of his baby and something that he wants to be known for at Notre Dame. And obviously it's been working out so far, but I don't think that I'm not concerned about it by any means right now. That's where I'm at with it as well, Sean. So you and I are in the same boat there. Got another question in here from Balpine Shillelagh. What positive and negative impacts can you predict from decreasing the number of spring practices?
Honestly, just looking at the list of non-participants in spring practice, it might just be a result of numbers. I think Rob Hunt met with the media and talked about how they're progressing in sports science at Notre Dame and adding that to what Lauren Lando is doing in strength and conditioning. So I think they're just doing their due diligence and finding out what's best and what works best for us to get our players through the spring. That's the most important thing, man. More than anything, we want to get better as a team, but we want to get our team through the spring healthy, especially after this long playoff run. It's a reaction to the long playoff run. A lot of teams are going to be doing something along these lines, right? You saw teams cancel spring games. And I think it's a reaction to, look, the landscape of college football, a long playoff run, players need to heal a little bit more because they go into all-season training. Like 2 weeks after they got back from the national championship game, they rev it back up. And now they go into spring, and it's like, man, less practices. Let's get these guys through this healthy so they can kind of take care of themselves and then go into the summer practices and the fall practices. So that could be another factor as well. It's a lot of factors, but I think collectively, the conversations that have taken place between Lauren Lando, Rob Hunt, Marcus Freeman, and the coaching staff could lead to them just being more proactive rather than reactive in the situation when it comes to their team's health.
Yeah, positive effects. I mean, definitely more rest after a long season. You're giving more players a chance to rehab and come back. Some of the limited participants in spring, some of that was just, I think it's more of like a pitch count. They just don't want to keep these injuries nagging leading into the summer, leading into fall camp to make sure that everybody's healthy and good to go by August 31st. One of the negative impacts is stuff that we've talked about and things that I've been writing about over the last couple of weeks here is just some of the spring competitions going into it. You are getting more of a limited sample size of what you're going to see. Not by a lot. It's not like they cut the practices in half. But there are some things where we're talking about, okay, Anthony Knapp is a limited participant in practice. What is that going to look like? Where are they going to put him in the rotation? What's it going to look like when, he's competing with Charles Jagasaw potentially at left tackle? Because Jags wasn't listed as a limited participant, mostly because he only has 2 starts under his belt and he needs to also continue to develop his game, which is totally fair and on the table. What's that going to look like with spring? Are they just going to slot Jags in at right guard and just assume that when Anthony Knapp comes back fully healthy, he'll be the left tackle? So it's going to be one of those things that's going to be interesting to see how that gets played out. Also with the quarterback competition in the spring, that's been obviously a really big topic for Notre Dame. Limited practices, you're going to get more of a limited sample size than what you would have before. So some positive, some negative. The injury list was long, but like we talked about it on the boards, a lot of those we knew about. It wasn't anything that it was like, oh gosh, didn't know Ashton Craig wasn't going to be around for the spring. Oh man, I didn't know that Boubacar was going to be out the entire spring. So some of the videos that they put out, you've seen some of them also in the weight room as well. And so they're still around the team. They're still going through it. I just didn't expect to see any of them in any live drills or anything like that because they are at the 6-month mark of their initial injury from last season. So I would have been shocked to see them out in pads running around. So that's where I'm at with that one. Let me see here. We have one in here from DJ. He says, if you were Mike Denbrock, how would you use Aeneas Williams?
Maybe sprinkle in a little bit more run game on first and second down, but I mean, with Jadarian and Jeremiah Love in front of him, maybe the screen game gets improved. Maybe you see some more screens to Aeneas Williams. But I think primarily what he does in the passing game, that was one of the most impressive things when we were watching him in high school. We would watch him split out and just the plays he would make in the passing game. It was like, okay. And you saw it against Penn State. That big pass is what really got that drive going. Like, they were starting to run the ball, but they bring him in and then spread him out wide. And he just embarrasses the linebacker, King, on a double move. And it's like, okay, that's who he is. And I think he's going to continue to get better. He's one of the best blockers against blitzes. That's why he's in there on third down the majority of the time. So I don't think Notre Dame is a place where, as a running back, you know you're going to bide your time. And that's one of the things Jawan Sider said he's going to continue. You know, he wants his running backs to have thread in the tire when they go to the next level. So it's going to be that way. And he was very honest in saying my best players are going to be in there at the most important snaps, or for the most important snaps. So maybe, you know, he gets an uptick, I think, in usage. But as far as he's still going to be behind the top two guys. But other than that, I would love to see him more. You already alluded to it, Trevor. The running backs are going to be more involved in the passing game. So I think that's where you're going to see Aeneas Williams really shine.
Yeah, with Aeneas, if I'm Mike Denbrock, I don't know if I'm jerking the wheel too much with Aeneas. I think he's a really great third down back. He can make plays in the pass game. He showed his ability as a runner. He had the breakaway touchdown against Army. He had the long run against Penn State to get him into the red zone. And so I don't think that it needs to be anything earth-shattering that he needs to do with him this upcoming season. I think it's just a little bit of a ramp up in production. But it's one of the conversations where you have to have where it's like, okay, so there's limited snaps that players can play. Offenses don't play 150 snaps a game. So if you're Mike Denbrock, I mean, who are you taking off the field? You know, do you take off Jeremiah Love? Do you take off Jadarian Price? I believe that the running back room is so loaded that they're going to have to run a little bit of 21 personnel this upcoming season because they have that much talent in the room. I would love to see a third down with Aeneas and Jeremiah on the field at the same time. I'd love to see a second down with Aeneas and J.D. Price on the field. I would just love to see Jeremiah Love and Jadarian on the field at the same time. You know what I mean? And so that's where I'm at with them. That's how I would use them differently. But Aeneas is still a really awesome third down back. I don't think that they need to change up how they use him outside of maybe putting him on the field with another back for his ability in the pass game. Line up Aeneas on another wheel route because I can bet you one thing, everybody's going to know where number 4 is, wherever he's lining up on the field. That's why against Penn State, they ran the wheel with Aeneas and they didn't run it with Jeremiah Love because everybody knew that was going to be coming. That's why Kobe King, the linebacker at Penn State, lined up on Aeneas Williams. I think that if Jay Love ran out of the backfield or he flexed out, Zakee Wheatley's probably on him. Do I think Jeremiah Love still makes that play? Yeah, I do, because I would take Jeremiah Love matched up one-on-one with a safety. But you look for your matchups, and Aeneas on Kobe King, a linebacker that was not good in coverage last season, that's something that I'm absolutely taking for sure. We'll get to one of Salty's in here. Salty Virginia Peanut says, where will the Irish linebacker group rank amongst all teams this season? It's a good follow-up from one of the questions that Brian asked us one of the last times that he was in here. So, Sean, after letting this marinate for some time, and I actually wrote a couple of articles about the linebacker group, kind of opened my eyes to a few other things as well. But for you, where will the Irish linebacker group rank amongst teams this upcoming year?
Well, I mean, objectively, they're going to be a top 5 group in the nation. You know, I think Texas is going to have a really good group. Obviously, Ohio State is going to have a good group. I think they're going to be one of the deeper groups, and the way they run their rotations is probably going to make them stronger than most groups. Similar to the conversation we had about the Penn State running back room and the Notre Dame running back room, right? You take production with the top 2, you might lean one way. If you take just overall depth, you know, you might lean the other way. So I think it's just an objective conversation. You know, I think the Michigan linebacker room is going to be really good in that second year as well. Really young. They lost a lot after the national championship, but that young group, I think they got better towards the end of the year. I think they're going to be pretty formidable. I'm looking forward to seeing, because King was a senior, wasn't he, if I'm not mistaken, for Penn State?
Penn State, yeah. I believe he's gone.
So we'll see who Penn State produces linebackers. So, I mean, I'm sure they're going to have a pretty good duo or trio. So Yeah, but Notre Dame's at the top. They're definitely at the top. And I would venture to say top two, and they might not be two, but
That's kind of where I'm at. Going into the season, I think they're top 5 and they're not 5th. That's kind of where I have them. I went back through and I started diving into how, because everybody talks about their talent. They're fast, they're long, they can make plays sideline to sideline, they can make plays in the pass game, they all fly downhill. I didn't realize how much experience they all had coming back. I mean, this linebacker group has 1,829 snaps played, as just 4 of them between Drake Bowen, Jalen Sneed, Jaden Osbury, and Kingston. And you had guys like Kingston only play in 14 games last year. I guess I don't want to say only because he's a true freshman and he dealt with injuries. Really 13 and a half because he missed the second half against Army. That's also the game that he earned his first start in as well. But you have a lot of guys coming back with experience, and you have guys like Jalen Sneed. I'll have an article coming out about him on Monday, but you have guys like Jalen Sneed who, towards the end of the season, he started to take on more than just being a situational linebacker. Before it was, third downs, he comes in, rushes the passer off the edge. He comes in as a pass rusher in nickel a lot. But then you started to see he started against Georgia, Penn State, and Ohio State. And he was one of the linebackers early against Georgia that was making an impact and making plays in the backfield. If he can continue to build on that performance, Drake Bowen takes his next step as a leader. I think that this room has all the capabilities to be a top 3, not third linebacking unit at the end of the year. Definitely going to be in the discussion as one of the best, if not the best. But going into the season, it's definitely top 5, not 5th for me. I'm really high on this group. And that's before we start talking about guys making an impact like a Madden Faramo to see what he does. That's before Preston Zinner, if he stays at linebacker. That's before he starts making an impact. There's still guys like Teddy Rizak and Bodie Cahoon. And so it's going to be really interested to see what they do with them. Keanu Kia is going to be coming back off of injury. He was one of the better performing linebackers in the spring game from last year. Talent is not a shortage in that linebacker room. Max Bola has a spoil of riches this offseason, but just between those 4, they have over 1,800 snaps of experience, and all 4 of them played very meaningful minutes in the postseason. And that experience is invaluable. So as a linebacking core as a whole, they're poised to have a really, really awesome year this year. That is for sure. John A1 had another really fun question in here. If Jimmy Clausen returned for his senior year in 2010, does that team win more than 8 games? I mean, for me, based on what Clausen did in 2009, if he was able to build on that, because he was going to have Michael Floyd healthy and another year in the system, I think it's an even more interesting conversation to talk about if Golden Tate also elected to come back for his senior year. I wonder how much Clausen leaving after 2009 played into Tate's decision to also leave after 2009. I mean, Tate had back-to-back really good years in 2008 and 2009 for Notre Dame. I'm going to go out on a limb. I haven't even pulled up their schedule yet, but I'll go out and say I absolutely believe that Notre Dame wins more games than 8 in 2010 if Jimmy Clausen is the starting quarterback again. What about you, Sean?
yeah, that's an easy yes for me. It's an easy yes. I think they absolutely win, probably maybe double digits. I would feel comfortable saying they had a good shot at winning double-digit games. Yeah, because I think, if he returns, Golden Tate, it's a great possibility that he comes back as well. And to have that duo coming back, yeah.
I'm looking at their schedule right now. I mean, the losses that they had in 2010, I mean, they lost to Michigan at home by 4. They lost to Michigan State on the road by 3. They got worked pretty good by Stanford at home, 37-14 in 2010. I do not think they lose to Tulsa at home.
No.
With Jimmy Clausen. I don't know if they lose to Michigan at home by 4. I don't know if they lose to Michigan State in overtime by 3 if they had Clausen.
Right.
So yeah, I would definitely say they have more than 8 wins.
That was that Michigan loss was the Cal Rudolph game, right?
That was
The
that was
90-yarder.
Well, because that was the game where Dane Christie ran a QB sneak, and then he was evaluated for a concussion, so he sat out. And then they rotated between Nate Montana and Tommy Reese. And I think they both threw picks. I'm pretty sure.
Whew.
And they still only lost by 4. And they had a Hail Mary attempt at the end of the game, but I forgot that Dane Chris had a hose attached to his arm, and he threw it out of the back of the end zone. Yeah, but that was the Kyle Rudolph game. Yeah, that was.
I think the Dane Chris game up in Michigan State was even more frustrating. Because early on, they had so many opportunities to blow that game open.
Yeah, they did.
Early on, it's just, man. Yeah, that was a frustrating season.
Yeah. Yep. I remember that one. We got a question in here from Elijah Badster. I'm sorry if I absolutely butchered that last name, Elijah. But question in here, win predictions for Nebraska this year. Thoughts on Dylan Raiola?
He's talented. Not surrounded by much offensively, but he's talented. Yeah, I think he'll get better. He's a tough kid, though. I remember watching that Ohio State game on the road and saying to myself, like, okay, this kid really has a shot because he has moxie. He's nearly not shaken. And that was a tough road test, and they really almost upset Ohio State at Ohio State. So I think the kid, by the time he's done after 3 years, because I think he's going to play 3 years and go to the NFL, I think he's definitely a first-round pick. I think he's a talented quarterback, very talented quarterback. Win predictions this year, Big Ten is tough, man. Big Ten is tough. I mean, Nebraska's behind Iowa, Illinois, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio State. Can they win a few games and make a jump? They lost a close game to Illinois at home last year. Is it possible that they can turn that around in some close games? They had an opportunity to beat Ohio State. They could be a 9-win team. They had some youngsters in their freshman class that I fully expect to step up and be playmakers offensively. Nelson Carter is one of those guys. Notre Dame fans know exactly about Nelson Carter because that's a tight end that we loved, and we wanted Notre Dame to add to that 24 class, and they weren't able to do it. So Carter Nelson, not Nelson Carter, I'm sorry. Yeah, they can win 9 games, Trevor. I think they can win 9 games this year.
Their schedule's extremely favorable. A lot of the teams that you listed off, they don't play. They don't play Oregon. They don't play Ohio State. They don't play Indiana. I mean, their first 3 games are all at home. Their first 5 games are all at home. They play Cincinnati at home, then they play Akron, then they play Houston Christian, and then they open up Big Ten play. And then they play Michigan at home, and then Michigan State at home. Then they have back-to-back road games against Maryland and Minnesota. Then they're home again for 2 straight games against Northwestern and USC. And then they're on the road again against UCLA. Then they have a bye. Then they're at Penn State. That'll probably be a loss. And then they finish up the season at home against Iowa. So I think that their schedule's favorable. I just have a lot of questions around – I have a lot of questions around Dylan Raiola. One of my things with him is, look, man, if you want to emulate Patrick Mahomes' game and how he plays on the field, I'm all for that. But let's not focus so much on the identical pregame routine, the identical wardrobe, the identical haircut. Look, be authentic. And if that is your authentic self, then that is what it is. But for me, I do have some questions around Dylan Raiola, but a lot of the mistakes that he made this past season were it was a true freshman starting in the Big Ten. I'm not out on him by any means. He's young, very young. He's going to continue to develop. Mm-hmm. I do like some of the talent that they have coming back around him. It's going to be interesting to see how Matt Rule does, because I don't know how much I trust him either. He says a lot of the right things. Some of his pregame speeches have been fun, but I got to see it from him. Nebraska's just been that program for me that it feels like every year I sit down and I look at their schedule and I look at their team and I'm like, they could be a, 8-9 win team if a few break right, a few break their way, and then they end up being 6-6 or 7-5. So I'm not sure. For me, Nebraska is one of those teams where I have to see it. I got to see him kind of take that next step and get to 9 wins, win one of those bigger games. But yeah, I think it's possible. Win predictions. I mean, if I'm going off of their schedule, I think they win their first 3. I think they beat Cincinnati, Akron, Houston, Christian. Maybe it'll be easier to do this. I think they lose to Penn State. It does help them out that USC is at home. I have no idea how they're going to be this upcoming season. I think they're going to lose to Michigan. And then I think they'll lose to USC. I could see them going 9-3. They'll have to – the Michigan State game will be interesting. Home against Iowa should be interesting. But it's possible. It's definitely possible. We have another one in here from Patrick Earwood. Patrick says, if you had to put an over-under for each quarterback's rushing touchdowns this year, what would they be if they were starters? I
mean, that's not my specialty, but I would think to say that the over-under for Kenny would probably be more than CJ's, and then CJ's will be more than Steve's for rushing touchdowns. What that number would be, I mean, I'm not an odds maker, so I'm not sure. That's a good question. And I don't think from what I hear, I think it was Mitchell Evans that echoed this, or actually said this, and I echo his sentiments when he said the quarterback that resembles Riley Leonard the most is probably Kenny in his athleticism. That's why I say Kenny would probably have the higher rushing touchdown odds or over under out of the group. Steve's would probably be very low. I don't even know if they would use Steve on a quarter. They used Steve for a couple of quarterback sneaks in the Sun Bowl. I do remember he had 1 or 2 quarterback sneaks. CJ's athletic enough to pull it in the red zone, but I think his number would be a little bit lower than Kenny's. I can't give you an exact number. I'm not good at setting those, so I'll just be honest. I'll be honest. Exact numbers I'm not good at setting when it comes to over-unders.
If I had to put numbers on it, because I always say if I were a betting man, but I am. So if I had to put numbers on it, I would probably put – because we're talking about ideally a 14, 15 game long season for Notre Dame. Ideally. I would set Kenny's at 6.5, over under 6.5. I would set CJ's at over under 4.5, and then I would set Steve's at over under 3.5. It's probably where I would be on that one. Because I think over the course of that long of a season, around the goal line, Steve would be good to pull at least 3 of those. Mm-hmm. And then you also have, a quarterback sneak. Odds are, Riley Leonard, for all of the pulls that he had around the goal line, he even had a couple of quarterback sneaks in there where he lined up under center. I think you could see the quarterbacks going under center a little bit more this season opposed to what they did with Riley Leonard last year. I don't think it's going to be much, but I do believe it will be more so. So, yeah, that's probably the numbers that I'd have them set at. Salty Virginia Peanuts has another one in here. Will Leonard Moore eclipse Benjamin Morrison's performance standard this season or next? So in 2025 or 2026. Sean, what do you think?
What's the standard? Interceptions? Like what's the standard? What are we looking at? Like interceptions, stats, or just overall like eye tests and ability to cover, or just impact. You know what? I'll say by the end of this year. I'll go ahead and say by the end of this year.
I'm going through and I'm pulling up some of these players' stats here, and just for reference, because Ben Morrison's sophomore season would have been what, 2023, right?
Yep.
I mean, you go through and you look at what he did in 23 and some of his stats. He was, let me see, he was targeted 51 times. He only allowed 25 receptions for 279 yards. He had 3 interceptions. He allowed 3 touchdowns. The most yards he allowed in a game was 79, and that came in the second to last week against Stanford. Outside of that, he didn't allow a single receiver to go over 50 yards. He was targeted against Ohio State in 2023. He was targeted 8 times. He allowed 4 receptions for 39 yards. And I know like 3 for 32 of that came against Marvin Harrison Jr., probably the best receiver in college football that past year. I mean, do I think it's doable? Sure. But I mean, to Sean's point, I think you're talking about a lot of different measuring tools here. Are we talking impact? Are we talking just stats? Are we talking interceptions? Are we talking about target to reception rate? All in all, I think it's possible. I think Leonard Moore has the opportunity to be a very, very impactful corner. Another one that I wouldn't sleep on is Christian Gray. Notre Dame's going to have 2 really good corners in the field and boundary next season. So, yeah, Salty, do I think that it's possible? I do. To eclipse it, I think that would be more likely in 2026. But again, what are we talking about standard here? Are we just talking about Notre Dame just has a lockdown corner on one side of the field? Because I'd make the argument that they have the potential to have both this upcoming season. So I would say it's possible for 25. I say it's very, very likely for 2026 because that'll be his true junior season. And barring any injury, Leonard Moore will have probably close to 30 starts under his belt going into his junior season because he's one of those players that will have to come back to college football. So it's an exciting topic to talk about, that's for sure. We have a question in here from a new listener, Brian Driscoll. And this one is for Sean. If Notre Dame could only land one Chicago area player in 2026, who would you want it to be and why?
Ooh. I have my preference right off the top, but now I'm thinking about position. I think the highest priority player from 26 in Chicago is probably Mikael Blade. Yeah, there's some other kids in the area that I like. Some Notre Dame haven't offered yet, but I think Mikael Blade, who I don't know if Notre Dame is still looking at him as an interior player. I think he has the opportunity to play on the outside, and he was injured the majority of last season, so hope he comes back healthy. I know they're still in on Braden Jones and communicating with him. He's currently a USC commit, but Mikael Blade would be my number one choice, and just strictly because I think he has the versatility to be just as impactful as Chris Burgess Jr. is going to be. He's really that good. He just didn't get the chance to show it at a bigger program like Simeon here in Chicago last year because of injury. But I think he's I talked to him about a couple of weeks ago. He's back to like running and revving it up, in his rehab. So that's the dude. That is definitely the dude in the 26th class.
Love it. Yeah, I love it. We got a super chat in here from Tyler Evans. Thank you so much for the super chat, Tyler. We really appreciate it. Can you guys give me your sleepers in each powerful conference this upcoming season? Bill Bender and I talked about some of these yesterday when I was on with him. In the Big Ten, a team that I would not sleep on is Indiana. And I know they kind of had that Cinderella story-esque type of season this past year. They bring a lot back, especially on defense. Mikel Kamara's coming back. Amari Farrell's coming back. D'Angelo Pons is coming back. Aiden Fisher is coming back. So they got some good pieces coming back, experienced pieces on their defense. And those are guys that played in the horseshoe against Ohio State.
Mhm.
Those are guys that beat down Nebraska at home in that big blowout when I think it was like 56-7. Those are also guys that played in the first round of the playoffs at night in Notre Dame Stadium. You guys know how tough of an environment that is to play, especially at night in South Bend. On offense, I believe Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper Jr. are both coming back, and those are their two leading receivers. They picked up that quarterback from California in the transfer portal. He's coming in to start. They got a running back from Maryland, I believe. So they're a sleeper team for me. I guess sleeper team in what light? I don't know if IU's going to contend to win the conference, but I think they could be a bubble playoff team. Their schedule this season is significantly tougher than what it was last year. I think they have to play at Penn State and at Oregon this year. Those games will be interesting. I do think that the Oregon game is going to be a little bit more interesting than the Penn State game initially, but you never know how that's going to start out. So I would say them, gosh, from each conference in the SEC, it's weird to talk about like an Alabama or an LSU being a sleeper team. You know what I mean? But, I mean, recently a lot of the talk has been around Georgia and Texas. So I could see that. Okay, true sleeper team in the SEC, I'd say Florida. Their schedule's really tough again this year, but I like DJ Lagway coming back. They somehow, out of that gauntlet of a schedule, they managed they go 8-5 or 9-4 last year. I think 8-5.
Yeah.
And so, yep. And so, assuming DJ Lagway can stay healthy, I think that's a big piece for them. So I'd go IU in the Big Ten. I'd go Florida in the SEC. The Big 12 is just so hard to predict, honestly, because I have no idea. I mean, the first teams that come to mind, gosh, I know Kansas returns Jalen Daniels, but he was back this past season, and they were not as good as what some people thought. Yeah, that one I'm not sure. Big 12 and the ACC, I'm not too sure. Maybe SMU would be in there again as a sleeper. Kevin Jennings is coming back for them. They had a pretty decent portal class. I'm not sure. Sean, what do you think?
Big 10, I wouldn't count Indiana as a surprise or a sleeper. I think they have a legitimate shot. If they can get a big road win at Penn State, I expect them to be better. Offensive line leadership, of course. That offensive line is probably going to continue to be good. You talked about the skilled players they're bringing back on both sides of the ball, especially a wide receiver. Running back, yeah. I don't think I can count them as a sleeper. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to, probably upset a lot of Notre Dame fans, but because of the way they played against the two best teams on their schedule, taking one to overtime and then going down to the final 4 minutes with the other one in a close game, I think they solved their quarterback situation. The defense played a lot better last year. If the defense can take another step, I think they clean some things up against the weaker teams. In the games they gave away, they literally gave games away in the Big Ten. I think USC can be a sleeper. I think USC can be a sleeper. I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think they could be a sleeper in the Big Ten. I'm hearing that DJ Lagway is going to be on a pitch count in spring ball. I knew he had a leg injury. I just I was confounded by the pitch count. Like, is that related to the leg injury, or is that an arm issue? So I was definitely going to go Florida. LSU could be considered.
I was gonna say them too.
A sleeper pick, but I just don't. Look, man, I just don't see that thing getting better, man. I just don't. I just don't. They've been a sleeper. They were a sleeper pick last year.
Yeah, that's fair.
They bring a lot back on defense, but I don't know. So I'll go with Florida. I'll stick with Florida.
I always get really nervous when entire receiving cores are built up entirely of transfer portal kids, and that's what LSU has.
That is dangerous. That is dangerous.
Because if it hits, like what Florida State did in 2023.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, you never know. Plus, I don't know how much I trust Garrett.
Like, yeah, Texas A&M is on the road at Texas, at Notre Dame. Like, that's some tough road games, man. Texas A&M has some tough road games. They might be a year away. So, yeah, Florida is probably the team. I was thinking about Oklahoma, but quarterback situation worries me a little bit. They're always going to be solid defensively. They just weren't able to score last year consistently. I don't know if they've solved that issue. So
turnovers.
The SEC, turnovers. That's going to be a problem in the SEC. I am interested in seeing what Clark Lee and his squad can do.
Yeah, with Diego Pavia coming back.
Yeah.
I
don't know if that qualifies as a sleeper pick, because I don't think I will ever pick them to win the SEC. But
I was about to say, like, it depends on what you mean by sleeper pick, Tyler. Because is it like, do you mean sleeper pick as in they're going to be better than what some people think, or do you mean sleeper pick as in they could win the SEC, they could make a playoff run? Because then that list does start to get a little bit shorter for me.
Yeah. ACC, you hit the nail on the head the other day. Yeah, Pitt, before they lost their quarterback, Pitt was playing really well.
Yeah.
And Coach Narduzzi, man, he can't finish. They always start out really well, man, and then they have that one really bad loss.
Yeah.
I remember they lost to Wake Forest. They started off hot, and they lost a game at Wake Forest. It was like, how do you lose that game? And, yeah. So I think Pitt is a sleeper. NC State, I forget the kid's name. His name escaped. Their freshman quarterback that they pretty much just put in there and just let him play at the end of last year. Kid from Florida, gangly kid, really tall. It's a Florida kid. Big-time talent.
CJ Bailey?
Talent. Yes, CJ Bailey. Big-time talent. If that kid can develop, North Carolina State, who I love their defensive coordinator, I love the defensive staff, how aggressive they are. Yeah, but I'll rock with Pitt.
I like that.
I'll rock with Pitt. Manny Diaz and what he's doing at Duke. I don't know, man. This ACC always has a couple of teams that surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I
like the Drones kid at Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech has a lot of talent. The defensive backfield. Probably underwhelming last year because they were expected to be one of the best defensive backfields in all of college football. Virginia Tech was another team. They stole the game against Miami. And they lost another close one early that they should have won. They lost about 3 or 4 games that they should have won. So Virginia Tech could be a sleeper team as well in the ACC. Big 12, you know what? I'm only saying this. I'm not saying this because of the head coach. I'm literally saying this because of the irony of it. We talked about this the other day, Trev. What is the irony? What would be the irony? Or how ironic would it be if Colorado solves the defensive and offensive lines after Shador and Travis leave? That right? And then you had Caden Salter, Juju, Lewis. Like, they have talent at the quarterback position, right? And he's shown that he can go out and get talent at the wide receiver position. So it definitely would be interesting. They could be a sleeper. I think Kansas also, the way they ended the season, could definitely be a sleeper team going into next year. And Texas Tech, right? They went on the road, got a big win against Iowa State when Iowa State was hot. They played Colorado close, particularly early in that game. Texas Tech could be a sleeper team, right? You never count out Utah, right? They had a down year, a bunch of injuries. played BYU really tough in that Civil War game towards the end of the year. That, and then Arizona State is pretty much, that was, do you expect, was that like a Cinderella season? Do you expect them to be the creme de la creme or picked coming into the season? Or, yeah, Big 12 is full of sleeper teams, in my opinion.
I was about to say, I think the Big 12 is just a sleeper conference. You never know. You really never know. Could it be Kansas? Could it be Arizona State again? Does BYU finish the season strong that they couldn't this past season? I mean, it's interesting, man. I'll say this. I will be keeping an eye on Deion Sanders. This is his, first year as a head coach where he doesn't have Shedeur as his starting quarterback? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be interesting to see what he does there. But it should be fun. But, yeah, that one I'm just not sure about because there's so many. I mean, the Big 10 or the Big 12 is just – honestly, especially after last season, you can tell me that any team in the Big 12 is up for contention to win that conference. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Utah, I mean, they're always going to be good on defense. Who knows if they can have a quarterback stay healthy for an entire season? That'll be a big question mark for them.
I mean, it flipped. The conference flipped in the last 3 weeks. Like, it just flipped. Who you thought was going to go to Arizona State gained ground and jumped over everybody, won the Big 12 championship game. Yeah, it was an intriguing conference to watch week to week.
Sticking with the common theme of conferences in here, Brian Driscoll also asked a question about who got the better of the ACC settlement, the ACC or Clemson and Florida State.
I guess beauty's in the eye of the beholder. The ACC kept things intact short term. Florida State has pretty much said we're leaving. It's just a matter of when, right? And so they got a step closer to the buyout not being as damaging for them. And then Clemson is like, yo, we have been the flag bearer for this conference. We deserve to get more money. And they got what they wanted. So I think the ACC would be, they made the flag bearer, they made Clemson happy. And I think the ACC would be fine with no Florida State, right? If someone doesn't want to be there, all right, start the process for them to no longer be there. So begin the divorce. Let's begin divorce proceedings, You have to pay us our alimony on the way out. It is what it is. We've come to that decision that we're parting ways, and we're going to start the process. So I think the ACC probably, they won with Clemson, and they won with Florida State.
Agreed. Well, that's where I'm at, too. I would say the ACC won that settlement. Overall, they're keeping Clemson, their flagship team. Florida State's coming off of a 2-10 season, and it's not like, I mean, Florida State has more of a potential to go to a different conference and be in Oklahoma in a different conference than they do being like a Texas or an Oregon in a new conference, in my opinion, barring Mike Norvell finding a way to turn that program around, which I have no idea what a turnaround looks like. Going from 13-1 to 2-10, is a good season 7-5? Is it 8-4? I don't know what that looks like. But initially, it's the ACC, especially when you have other teams like SMU comes in. They competed for the conference title in their first season. Miami is having back-to-back impact portal quarterbacks in really 2 straight years. We'll see what Carson Beck does for them, I think. But it's not like the ACC is losing their best team in Florida State. They're able to maintain Clemson as well. And you have other teams that are kind of slowly starting to pass them by, especially depending on what they do this season. Because Florida State did go 13-1 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
and see, the big thing, the ACC really, that SMU point, you're talking about a school that has far more or far stronger financial backing than Florida State. And if you can just get Miami to be Miami as a conference, you'll be all right. You'll be all right over the next 3 to 5 years. If Miami can finally answer the bell, be Miami, and then because you need that rivalry. They don't really have that high every year. They don't have an Ohio State, Michigan meeting. Like, they need that. And they were thinking that Miami would be that for Clemson, right? But Clemson doesn't. Maybe Louisville could become that. Like, that's what the ACC is waiting for. Like, after that great ACC championship game, can SMU now become that for Clemson? That's what the ACC is really missing. That second team to give you the annual game that you're looking for Clemson each and every year. That's really what they're missing. The SEC has that in waves, right? Because it's Tennessee, Alabama. Now it's Alabama, Georgia in the regular season. You know, it's those are the games that you have within the conference that has fans salivating. The ACC doesn't have that quite yet, and they're hoping they can get that.
Also, fun fact, I didn't know this until Bill Bender told me yesterday. I did not know this, but Miami's never won the ACC. Do you know that?
Makes sense. Heck, Mario Cristobal just got above 500 as a head coach. So,
yeah, that was a wild stat. He said that, and I was like, God, you wouldn't think about it. But because we had a conversation around, is the U back? And Bender basically talked about how he has to see it before he's willing to coin them as back. So I thought that was one of the more shocking.
He did say that. Well, yeah. Which game was that? Was that the Florida game? When post game he was talking crazy. He was talking crazy. He was talking crazy after that Florida game.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Like, dude, you at that point he wasn't above 500 as a head coach, but he was talking like cash money. Come on, man.
Yeah. John A1, Jeremiah Love caught 28 passes for 237 yards in 2024. Do you think he'll produce more receiving production in 2025? Average 1.75 catches per game, 14.5 yards per game, 8.5 yards per catch in a game.
I think his production goes up everywhere, man.
Yeah, I do too. Over the course of a season, definitely. I think he's going to be used more in the passing game. I think he'll have more design. To me, I view it as like a layered process almost. I think Notre Dame is going to have to show that they can push the ball down the field vertically to open up some of the slip screens to Love. Because again, like I've said, teams are going to identify where number 4 is. He's going to be one of the best players returning in college football in 2025.
Yeah.
You better believe that they're going to know wherever he's at, whether they flex him out wide, whether they motion him out of the backfield, whether he starts in the slot and motions back into the backfield, you ID where number 4 is. Like we talked about before, if teams are going to lose to Notre Dame because Jeremiah Love goes off, that was a letdown. You know what I mean? It's kind of like when you talk about all those other teams. Like I said this before Notre Dame played Ohio State in the 2015 Fiesta Bowl because that team was loaded with talent. Michael Thomas, they had who's their quarterback that game? JT Barrett, they had Zeke Elliott. And I said this, and I was like, look, if Notre Dame loses this game because JT Barrett just has a day, he goes 25 of 32 for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Like, it is what it is. If they lose this game because Ezekiel Elliott goes for $160 and 2 touchdowns, then that's a failure in my eyes. And that's how a lot of teams are going to approach Notre Dame in 2025 is, look, if one of their new starting quarterbacks, whether it's Angeli or Carr or Minchie, just has a day, they go for 275, 2-3 touchdowns, they're just dialed in, hitting throws, then maybe that was their day. If they lose because Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price combined for 200 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns, to me, that's a defensive letdown. And so I think it's going to be something to where his production in the pass game is going to ramp up as the season progresses. But I think with that, his numbers will be higher than this. So, John, to answer your question, I do think he will be more productive. I just don't want it to be something because we are a reactionary fan base. And so if against A&M and Miami, Jeremiah Love doesn't end each game with 4 receptions for 50 yards, the sky's not falling. It's just I think you have to wait for the offense to develop. Give time for the downfield passing game to develop, and then Notre Dame can start hurting them at all 3 levels, short, intermediate, out of the backfield, and downfield. So
yeah, I think a lot of things. I was watching a couple of games recently, and you could tell early on they wanted to get him involved, especially in the screen game. Like they would take him out the backfield, spread him out, and then try to run the screen with him. But as soon as he's, The eyeballs are on him. So now it's up to the others to loosen things up for Jeremiah Love, right? And that goes with having viable threats on the outside that actually take the attention of the safeties, right? To make them pay attention. And that's going to be vitally important as well. How do the others impact opportunities for the running backs in the passing game? That's something to look forward to as well.
See, get to some of these other ones in here. Salty has a bunch in here. We'll get to some of them. Here we go. Salty Virginia Peanuts. Will Adon Schuler have an All-American performance this season?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit by sale whole. Yeah, he has an opportunity. You know, first, second team, third team. I think second team is definitely doable, right? I figured one of the first team slots is going to be that guy up in Columbus, so he's going to have one of the slots, and so everybody else will vie for the second slot.
Yeah. Look, if we're talking about Adon Schuler being the first team All-American over Caleb Downs, this is going to be a fun year. I'll say that. But yeah, I think he absolutely can. I think if it, and you'll have to hear me out on this one. I don't know if you'll disagree, but if it wasn't for Xavier Watts, like if Adon Schuler just had the same season that he had in 2024, but the safety lining up next to him didn't have 6 interceptions and was a back-to-back consensus All-American, I think there'd be even more hype around Adon Schuler. Adon Schuler, I believe, ended the season with more interceptions than Malachi Starks and the same amount as Caleb Downs. And he was their second best safety on the team. And so I fully believe Adon Schuler to have a really big breakout year. And again, there's different levels to breakouts. Yes, when I tell people that Adon Schuler is going to have a breakout, a lot of the pushback is, well, he started 16 games. He had a great year. He did. But I think he's going to break out from being, a solid part to this defense to being that guy.
Yeah.
Being the guy that makes the plays in the big moments. So I agree with you there. Definitely agree with you there. Another super chat in here from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler, for another super chat. Appreciate that, man. Give me one coach you believe if he doesn't turn around this upcoming season, he'll be on the hot seat in 26. I have Brent Pry at Virginia Tech.
Brent Pry is a good one. That's a good one. We mentioned Dan Lanning the other day. You mentioned Dan Lanning. Like, he's one season away from possibly having a hotter seat if he doesn't get over the hump this year, right? You see another first round exit in the playoffs, or just say first game, because they might not play in the first round, but they lose the first playoff game. Yeah. I think Mr. Row the boat.
Yeah.
Is getting to a point.
Yeah.
Where it's like, all right, buddy, there's been a lot of talk and chesty, expectations, and we don't have much to show for it, You got down in Florida, man. Like, he saved a lot of things the second half of the season, but I don't think he's out of the woods quite yet.
No.
I don't think he's out of the woods quite yet.
No.
I think Crystal Ball is okay. I do. And this is coming from, like, knowing people that played at the program. I think Crystal Ball is I think he's okay. I really do. Because I think they have bought hook, line, and sinker into, like, recent to whereas they feel like it's if we can just get these one or two things right. Like, that's the feeling. Could a catastrophic season change that internally? Possibly. I'll keep it all the way funky with you, Trevor. Hey, if things don't go right in Baton Rouge, man, you think about an 8-9 win season this year, that seat could get really hot, and that would be an enormous buyout. to make that happen. But it might be some backroom meetings to say we need to pass around a collection plate. Like this is necessary, right?
Get the bowl out.
Same thing they did with Jimbo. Like, hey, we need to make this happen now. And then it's about timing, right? What coaches become available, right? Mike Elko became available. It's like, all right, let's go get this guy. I think Lincoln Riley is safe. I really do. I think really Lincoln Riley is a great salesman. I think the USC people are sold on, we fixed this defense. His track record is offense. Like I said, they could be a sleeper team in the Big Ten. But I think he's safe. You know, if they just improve a little bit, I think he'll be safe.
I think the Chad Bowden hire helped prolong Lincoln Riley a little bit.
Yes, because now he's tied to Chad. They're tied together. So Chad would at least get, 2 to 3 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that hire helped. Because here's the thing. I would have said Lincoln Riley if that hire didn't happen because he's digressed every single year as a head coach at USC. Overall record-wise, performance on the field-wise, I don't think that – now, yes, I do still think it's a shot, and I'm not trying to defend what Chad Bowden said, but I don't think that it's a coincidence that in a year potentially that Lincoln Riley could be moving on to the hot seat, that Chad Bowden started talking about how great of a recruiter he is, and you got to trust the process, and you got to wait to get the talent in here. Now, look, anybody that can kind of weed through that stuff, it's like, dude, he's going into his 4th year as a head coach. The talent should be there. Marcus Freeman went into his 3rd year as a head coach at the start of 2024, and we saw the talent there. So, but I do think that could be a little part of it. But I think the Chad Bowden hire really helped Lincoln Riley's tenure at USC. I think that Brian Kelly is down there, down in Baton Rouge. He could be, depending on the season that they have. Kalen DeBoer, I saw somebody put that in the chat as an interesting topic for me. I think that if he were at a different program not named Alabama, that there wouldn't even be a discussion of him being on the hot seat. I think it's going to depend on how many people around the program are willing to wait another year of them potentially not playing in the national championship or the college football playoff semifinals. I personally don't believe that he should be, but I could see it if it's another 10-2 year. They're not in the SEC championship again. You know, they get a couple of wins in the regular season and they get bounced in the first round of the playoffs. I could see that seat starting to heat up because of the program that he's at, which I might not necessarily agree with, but I could see him being one of them. I think a conversation has to be had around Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. I know we've had conversations about him on the show before. It's like, the expectation at Oklahoma State, I don't know if it's the same as Notre Dame where you're expected to be competing for a national title every year. But going from a year where you played for the Big 12 championship to going 3-9 and not even being bowl eligible, that's a bad miss even for Oklahoma State standards in my mind, especially when you had Ollie Gordon coming back, who basically did not a whole lot last year. I think that one could be interesting. If it's another lackluster season, but you never know. Oklahoma State's that weird team that just when you don't think a whole lot of them, they end up going 9-3. So, but I think that could be interesting for him. I think if he misses bowl season again, I think that conversation could start getting hot. But those are all the ones for me off the top of my head. Got another question in here from Ballpeen Shillelagh. With Juwan Sider coming in and a full running back room this year, how likely is it that we see a 4-back rotation? Love is 1A, Price is 1B, Aeneas with his flexibility, and Kedron in short downs. What do you think, Sean?
Oh, that's exactly what he said in his press conference. That's what he has. He has a 4-back rotation. He said that in his press conference, so you're spot on right there with that Ballpeen Shillelagh. That's exactly what Juwan Sider said he's looking to do, which made me feel really good. You talked about maintenance and maintaining the roster. When we talk about Mike Martin, I think the biggest maintenance project is Kedron Young. Like, how are we going to get him involved? Right. How are we going to get him touches? How are we going to get him playing time? Because we need to get him activated, right? He fought through injuries early when he got to Notre Dame, came back, and had to sit behind three guys that are just really good, so he understands the talent that's in front of him, but you still need to feed him a little bit. You still need to feed him a little bit. And I was really happy to hear him say usually he has a 4-back rotation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the best way to build depth, and that's what he talked about, because he did say you never know when your fourth guy needs to be your number one guy.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's something that we learned from Notre Dame season last year, if a player can get hurt, they will get hurt. And it's something that they have to be ready for. Notre Dame just has a spoil of riches in that room to where if at some point this season the 1A, 1B back has to be Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young, it's cool with me. That is cool with me. Aiden Benami, should Notre Dame continue their spring game or follow suit of others and try not to lose players?
This is funny because I actually had this conversation with a few people. The spring game is it's a lot of donations that come in during the spring game weekend. So I don't think Notre Dame is going to do away with that. I understand why people are moving away from it. I don't like it as a traditionalist of college football. You live for the spring game. You live to hear about how the young players have progressed and who might be the breakout player going into the fall. But the truth of the matter is the vast majority of these games, especially on these networks, these conference networks, are broadcast. So the feel of having to drive down with the family and, tailgate and enjoy the game, and the luster is a little bit, the shine is a little bit dulled when it comes to that and how it used to be. And you can see the reasons why from a financial standpoint why not doing, but I just don't think Notre Dame and who they are and what they represent, Trevor, I can't see them stepping away from that. I can't. Are there factors that might make them think about it? Possibly. I think I'll be interested. The attendance at the game, I'll be interested in how it's looked over the last 5 years. That would be telling, and whether or not a conversation needs to be had.
I'm torn on this one because I'll say this. Do I think that Notre Dame should continue their spring game for the benefit of the fans? I absolutely do. Everybody knows what the ticket prices are at Notre Dame Stadium. It's a lot. I will say this, one thing that I thought that was interesting. I read an article the other day that Notre Dame didn't have a regular season game last year that ranked in the top 20 of college football games for the most expensive seat, average ticket price. I think that story was a little different in 2023 because they had Ohio State coming in a top 10 matchup. They had USC came to town, ranked number 10, undefeated. Notre Dame was ranked in both of those games. So I think it was a little bit different, I will say, in 23. But look, from a fan standpoint, I hope they never get rid of it. Some of my best memories were going to the Blue Gold game with my dad. Any excuse that I could have to get inside of that stadium, I would take.
Yeah.
With that being said, I don't know what the big advantages are for the program itself to have the spring game. Like if I'm looking at it, let's just say if I worked at Notre Dame, what is the advantage? Sure, some of the advantage is getting the players or getting the fans inside of that stadium for one more opportunity outside of a regular season game. I totally understand that. But even with Notre Dame's ticket prices being as expensive as they are, they sell out still almost every single home game. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I don't know how much that would turn off people from going to the games. And this is coming from somebody who genuinely believes that they should still keep it. But from a program standpoint, I don't know what it's doing for your players. I mean, especially look at last spring game. You had guys like some of the marquee guys, like they didn't play a whole lot because they didn't have to. What did you need to see from Riley Mills in the Blue Gold game? What did you need to see from Jack Kaiser in the Blue Gold game? You know what I mean? And so it's not like if they get rid of the spring game, they don't do things like a jersey scrimmage or go live at practice. It's not that. But I personally would still like to see it, and I do believe that Notre Dame will continue to do it because they are a very traditional school that I do think, in comparison to some others, care a little bit more about their fan base because they haven't gone away from it. But isn't Ohio State one of the programs that did away with it?
I think Texas,
Nebraska,
which is funny because Texas had one of the top. Notre Dame was 10th in spring game attendance last year. 37,000 showed up. Ohio State was number 1. They had 80,000 at the spring game. Alabama had 72. Penn State had 67. Nebraska had 60,000. They're walking away from it. Georgia had 55 to come in 5th. So I don't know, man. When you have those numbers and schools are still willing to go away from it. Notre Dame, another thing. Notre Dame owns their own intellectual property. So the spring game is on Peacock, man. I mean, they really are feeding themselves in so many different ways, right? Like I said, it's the conference. The SEC network is broadcasting the SEC spring games. That's all shared. Like, that revenue is all shared. Notre Dame is taking everything in for itself. So everything you laid out for the reasons why you could talk about moving away from it, totally valid. But I don't think it impacts the bottom line.
Sure.
I don't think it impacts the bottom line as much.
Especially not for a place like Notre Dame.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
And basically, I think from a football standpoint, Trevor, you played, right? The most important practice is actually the week before the blue and gold game. Blue and gold game is for the fans.
Oh, yeah.
The scrimmage the week before is the most important practice. So most teams might think, man, we want that to be the peak. We kind of want to walk off after that. We don't have to come back out a week later and now entertain the fans, But if that's the case, then just have that scrimmage be, but you don't want to have that scrimmage in front of fans. You know what I'm saying? So from a football coaching perspective, I kind of get it.
I do too.
I get it.
I do too. From a football standpoint, I totally get why a team would want to go away from it. From a fan standpoint, I never want it to go away. No. And that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah.
Salty has a question in here, Sean, you might be a little bit more apt to handle. What are the odds that Tank King will be Irish?
Man, you guys get asking me for odds and over-unders. Man. Scale of 1 to 10, I'll just do scale, right? Scale of 1 to 10, I think Notre Dame's shot of getting Tank King is right at about 7.5 right now. Confidence level. Not my confidence, their confidence and how they feel. I think 7.5 will be about where it sits right now. We have to let these visits take place, man.
Yeah.
Visits, and then hear what the young man has to say after the visit, the official visit, and then I'll have a better feel. But right now, you know what I've learned, man? I remember when I first started to cover recruiting, you would hear somebody say something really good. Like, let's say Mike Mickens is the contact for a DB. Like, Mike Mickens is my guy. And you hear that, and even though I'm covering Notre Dame, I'm still a fan. So that hits both sides. It hits the recruiting analyst, but it hits the fan side, right? And so I've had to learn how to kind of cut one side off when I'm listening to young men to be able to rightly kind of discern what's really being said, right? Am I really getting some intel, or is this just kind of like recruit speak because they know they're talking to someone that covers this school? So it's going to be interesting to hear, what's said after the visits.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I get that.
The chat is the best, man.
I know.
The chat is the best. Jason, you're crazy, man.
Jason Smith wanted to weigh in on it. He's at 76.8%.
Salty that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Salty I was at 75.
Yeah. Salty was a little upset with his rounding, but that's okay. That's okay. Tommy Guns, do you expect quarterback reps to be as close to 33.3% as possible through spring ball, keeping up with the exact percentages?
Yeah. Early. Yeah. Yeah, I do. It was like that for Hartman and Buckner. It was very close as far as reps. There was no decided advantage. I just think it's an advantage when they come get you in the portal and give you money. Mm-hmm. That's an advantage, So, like we said, there really is no clear advantage for any of these guys. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty fair competition.
A lot of that is what we talk about being all things equal, fair, equal competition. These are some of the numbers that go into it. What an unfair competition would look like is if it's something where, CJ's taking all the first team reps or 60% of them, and then the other 40% is split up amongst Stephen Kenny or some sort of combination in there, or if it's, man, CJ's really lighting up everything. Yeah. On scout team, it's one of those things where I think it has to be as close to that split as possible. And so that's what I'm hoping for. Do I expect it? I do. Mike Denbrock has seen his fair share of quarterback competitions in South Bend during his time at previous stops. So, yeah, I would expect it to be that. And I would be disappointed if it was not. And it's something that we'll get to see firsthand when we get to be up at spring practices. Another question in here from John A1. In 2025, do you think Notre Dame will throw more on downs with less than 2 yards to go? I guess like throw more than they run, or are you saying throw more than what they did in 2025? Because the answer is different depending on which lens you're looking at this from. If I think they'll pass more than that they run it, no, I don't, because Notre Dame is still going to be a line-driven program that wants to be able to establish a line of scrimmage, run the ball, stop the run. Do I think that they will pass more this year than they did last year on short down and distance? That I do. Especially because you didn't specify third down. I think you're going to see more shots taken downfield on second and short this year. I really do. And I think that's when the conversation comes up that, Kedron Young could be the short down back, all those different things. And so I think you could see more passing attempts on second down and distance being at, 3 yards to go. Some of that's also going to depend on where they're out on the field. This team is shown to be very, very aggressive. And I think with this offense, anytime you get really inside of the 40-yard line, might be a little bit too long of a field goal. Yeah, I could see them taking a shot on 3rd and 3, going for it on 4th down. I think it's all on the table.
I just think the offense opens up and blooms and evolves. So, yes, you'll have more opportunities to throw the ball in those situations.
Give me a Jaden Greathouse slot fade on 2nd and 2. Man.
You go watch Miami of Ohio, Stanford, like that bunch of games right there. Because Jaden Greathouse caught a lot of flack for the drops against Northern Illinois. Jaden Greathouse was making like big plays just about every game, So it's like, it really, in hindsight, when you look back, now it makes the Penn State game and Ohio State game like, okay, it's been there. Like he's really
sure
been there.
has.
Like
Oh,
he's
yeah.
been available and open. It just for whatever reason didn't happen. Chris Mitchell, you go watch him early in the Miami, Ohio game and the Stanford game. Like, okay, these are opportunities that were there, and for whatever reason, things just didn't click the way I'm sure Mike Denbrock wanted it to click. And I think early on it was directly connected to the offensive line, more than likely, because good grief. Early in both games, I mean, Riley couldn't even, he's already a shotgun. But by the time he turns around to just set his feet, like, it's pressure. And it's like, what do you do? What do you do?
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I am. I've thought about going back through and kind of making a compilation video for myself of missed opportunities in 2024, but then I think it would just make me upset.
So, absolutely would. I'm telling you, dude. Look, literally, Trevor, I've watched the Miami of Ohio game and the Stanford game, and I'm sitting there saying to myself, this is the team that just played in the national championship. Like, there's no way you were going to tell me on that Saturday that team was going to play for the national championship. No way. I'm not believing that. Not believing it at all.
No.
Not believing it. No way. But somehow, that's what ended up happening, right? And so, that for me speaks volumes. Because they didn't look good at all. Like, the loss was one thing, but then the very next week against Miami, Ohio, early on, they just didn't know. That's not a championship team. And then early against Stanford, like, that's not a championship team. And little by little, they put it together, Trevor. Right? And that's success in life, man. That's how you encourage people. Just don't try to do everything at once. Just get better little by little and believe. And that's what that team did, man. Just little by little, they worked on the things they needed. They figured their identity out. They played into it. And they said, this is the way we're going to have to win this year. Forget what we thought we could be. This is how we're going to have to do it. They bought into it. And the next thing you know, by the time they got to Georgia Tech, they started to take off and became very dangerous. So I think we're going to see, there were a lot of missed opportunities to do this on second and third and short. A lot of missed opportunities that were there, possibly from like play call, but just like whether it's the offensive line or just couldn't get to it, or quarterback play, just couldn't get to it for whatever reason.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you saw as the season went on, Denbrock just went away from calling it completely because he knew it'd be a wasted play.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame was efficient enough that it's like, okay, really anything inside of 5 yards that they had to pick up, you could get in 2 downs, given where you're at on the field. I mean, that's just with who you had under center, his running ability, and the offensive line's forte being in run blocking. Pass blocking was a little meh. Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, because then you're in the point as a play call, it's like, why call it? If you know it's not going to, A, either get thrown or B, protected well enough, just kind of scrap it and call it at a reasonable time. So I'm with that completely. Mark Avalone, was it just me, but the final play of the Penn State game, if Allard doesn't throw the final lateral out of bounds, they had their entire O-line in front of the running back with hardly any Notre Dame players. I did see that when that backwards lateral was coming. That is a lot of ground to make up for Notre Dame's defense, but I think players would have peeled back. But that you could tell that was kind of like the design. Like some schools, depending on, will have a play like that in their back pocket, like a schoolyard type of play, of, all right, well, we have to score and we have 75 yards to go and we don't have a quarterback that can just throw it 75 yards in the air. So we're going to have to scheme something up. And that was definitely what they were trying to do. You see a lot of teams do that on like razzle dazzle, like kickoff return type plays, where it's you focus everything, you do some laterals on the right side of the field. They wait for blockers to get set up. What was that? Miami did that against Duke in that crazy final kick return. So I don't know if he would have scored on that play. He would have had blockers in front of him because Nicholas Singleton was also very upset that the ball went out of bounds after that play was over, if you remember, because he knew what he had set up in front of him. I don't know if he would have scored on that play, but all I know is, Marcus, he didn't. Notre Dame went and played in a national championship game. But, yes, you are correct. They did have some blockers set up in front. He had a nice little convoy in front of him if Aller didn't airmail it out of bounds. He was also hit on that play by both Drake Bowen and
nailed.
I mean, yeah. I know
I can't fault Drew Aller for that.
No. He got hit pretty good on that play. Salty Virginia Peanuts. Sean, how impactful will Jared Dawson be this season?
I think he fulfills a need. I think he's very efficient at rushing the passer from that interior. So he can kind of replace Riley Mills as that main pass rusher from the inside. And I think Riley Mills, I think he does an incredible job of getting off the ball and defeating blocks, but also he can push. This is I didn't know they start this stat right here. Created sacks is a new stat, Trevor, that I just found out about that they track in the NFL. Yeah, and Trey Hendrickson, who's a free agent now from the Bengals, or I guess he's not a free agent. He can explore trade possibilities. He led the NFL in sacks, but he created 35 sacks. The second in the league created 14. So that's the type of season he had. That's crazy. So even if he didn't get the sack, what he did led to 35 more sacks, which is insane. So I think if Jared Dawson, forget the stats, if he can make that type of impact at his push, early, penetration, if that can lead to other things and getting, what they have in depth on the outside as far as pass rushing, if he can kind of make quarterbacks step into sacks because of what he's allowed to do pressure-wise in the interior, yeah, his impact will be pretty profound, and that's why they went and got him. So that's the type of guy, man. And he's not going to be asked to play a lot of snaps. You need him in there for the most important snaps. You need that pass rush. So, yeah, he's going to have an impact.
I do think an underrated part of his game is how well he performs in the run defense, too. Notre Dame's interior defensive line, especially once Riley Mills went out, had some trouble eating up blocks. You saw that a lot in the Penn State game in the first half, which didn't allow the linebackers to scrape over and fill like they needed to. I think if the linebackers have a really good season this year, you're going to have to talk about interior defensive line play and their ability to eat up blocks. And so that's going to be another huge impact that Jared Dawson is going to have. Question in here from CNEP. How long do you think Notre Dame's independence will last? I think it will be for quite some time. Go Irish. Hope all is well.
I mean, This has been answered. This has been answered, Jack. Whether it's Jack Swarbrick, Pete Bavacqua, it's going to last until they're forced to join a conference because that's the only way they can get into the playoff. I mean, they've been upfront about that. This is not about what everybody else does. The Big 12 going out and finding private, funding to fund the entire conference, and the SEC, the ACC doing what they did with revenue sharing, Georgia doing what they're doing on July 1st, hoping to bring the rest of the SEC with them. For Notre Dame, it's really simple. We have our own TV contract. We have our own apparel contract. The only thing that's going to force us to do anything is the playoff and the pathway to a national championship. I mean, they've been upfront about that. They've answered that. Marcus Freeman answered it right next to Coach Squidward from Penn State. So, I'm sorry, man. That was petty. That was petty. I'm sorry. Coach Franklin. I'm sorry, Coach. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's so good. Oh, that's so good. Yeah, Neb, Notre Dame is going to be independent for the foreseeable future, barring something to where it's Notre Dame cannot make the playoffs unless they join a conference, and I don't see that. There have been safeguards put in place in Notre Dame's favor in that regard, so I don't think that would change. No, I don't think that would change. Coach Squidward is so awesome.
Forgive me, guys. That was another guy. That wasn't me. I don't know who that was that said that. Spank myself, Trevor.
Oh. Salty Virginia Peanuts. Will the Irish offense or defense be the higher ranked unit this season? It's a good question.
I'm riding with the defense until further notice. Like I have no reason to come off that defense. I just don't. I'd love to see it though. But wasn't that the vision that Mike Denbrock laid out at his first press conference? Top 5 defense, top 5 offense. Mm-hmm. That's what he said. So that's the vision. That's what they're shooting for. So
ideally, it's the defense because the defense is a top 2 unit and the offense is like a top 5 and they're 4th. So, yeah, but I think until further notice, until shown differently, it's going to be the defense. Does the offense have the potential to be? Potentially, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think so, especially on who, will the players break out the way that we think that they will? Will J. Love and J.D. Price pick up where they left off? Yeah, I think they absolutely have the opportunity to be, but until further notice, that defense is nasty, man.
Yeah.
It's gonna take a pretty good force to be able to dethrone them. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Got one in here from Aiden Benami. First overall pick for your team, and you have 2 choices. Notre Dame bias out. Jeremiah Love or Jeremiah Smith. J. Love has better overall skills, but Jeremiah Smith is dominant at one position.
I mean, just the current state of football will elevate the wide receiver over the running back. Just being objective. So if I take the bias out and I'm a GM looking at this situation, I'm going to look at the impact of the wide receiver over the impact of the running back. And I'm going to say I can find a running back if I get a guy like Jeremiah Smith. If I get Jeremiah Love, can I find a guy like Jeremiah Smith? And that's just the way people look at the game. I can find running backs. I can go find a running back that could be productive. So it probably leans that way. I can't take, I'm sorry, ladies and gents, I've tried. I can't take my ND bias out. I can't. I try it all the time. I try it all the time.
Look, this one's kind of tough, right? Because I think for the running back to be good, you have to have a pretty decent offensive line. And for Jeremiah Smith to be good, you have to have a quarterback that has the ability to get him the football. I'm a firm believer that you still need to be able to run the ball well at this level. I do. Yes, Jeremiah Smith played on the national championship team for Ohio State. Yes, he had the 3rd and 11 call.
So is this first overall pick for the NFL or for college?
I think it's if we were building our own team for college.
Okay. Because I'm thinking NFL. That's what I'm thinking NFL.
Oh, I got you.
And the way the game is played. That first overall pick messed me up.
Yeah. I'm reading this at the college level, and if it is, I'm going to take somebody like Jeremiah Love because your quarterback play doesn't have to be spectacular to get Jeremiah Smith the ball because his catch radius is what it is. Mm-hmm. But I have more confidence that I would say all 134 starting quarterbacks at the FBS level, I know they can hand the ball off.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I make my decision. And so I would probably still go Jeremiah Love. And I'm also in the same boat as Sean. It's really hard for me to take my Notre Dame bias out of something. I can when we're talking about an opponent prep, when it's something where it's like, okay, like how do you think Notre Dame does against this opponent? I don't know if Brian would have hired me if every single analysis that I bring to the table for every game week is
Was
Notre
pro
Dame's going
Notre
to win
Dame.
by 45. You know what I mean? Do I think Notre Dame's still going to win? Yeah,
That's
I
the
do.
way you feel, though. That's the way you feel, though.
Listen, man. There's been some times where I'm writing my game predictions that we publish out, and I'm just like, all right, Notre Dame 54, Stanford 2. All right, maybe 49-7. That's a little bit more fair. You know what I mean? But I have to check myself sometimes when I'm writing stuff. I got fired up when I was writing this linebacker article, and I put a sentence in there that I took out, and I was like, I don't think this could be one of the best linebacking cores in all of college football by a landslide. And I was like, not by a landslide. Let me reword this. Okay, the potential of this room is through the roof.
Right.
And they have So but the bias is there because, to your point, still being the fans that we are, it's hard to not get fired up about this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and so you have to learn a good balance to bring both to the table. We have a question in here. It's just from YouTube user. And so if you're still in the chat, we'd love to know what your actual screen handle name is. But question from YouTube user, do you think cutting down media access to practices is related to letting other teams shopping for players in the portal see or hear reports on our players? Blue and gold game is right before the portal opens.
Media access has zero to do with the information that comes out of the building. I'll leave it at that. So regardless of whether or not the media is at the practice or not, if the media has contacts to still get information, it's going to get out. You know, and, you know, like any other institution, you let the information leak out that you want to get out. There is no look. When CJ Carr showed up for bowl prep, the Sun Bowl, and things started leaking out about how he looked, that wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Notre Dame wanted things like that to get out and to be known. They were going to the Sun Bowl. Like, you know what? We're going to the Sun Bowl. Let's go ahead and get the fan base a little more fired up. Yeah, that's what happens. You know, so, access, I think that's Marcus Freeman's culture. That's Marcus Freeman's culture. That's a little bit different than his predecessor's culture. That's probably a little frustrating for the media, you know. We would like more access, but, you know, I do think moving the game up before the portal opens rather than it being after the portal, because usually the blue and gold game would be around the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, something like that. This year, I think it would have been the 26th if they had kept it in the same weekend. Yeah. You know, I think that's one of the reasons why it was moved up. But as far as the media access and, you know, them worrying about certain things getting out, it's been made very clear what should not be talked about, right? We don't talk about injuries, you know, unless it's been released. Like, even if you saw something during media access periods, you're in trouble. Like, if you're seeing that you're talking about injuries and other things that we've been told not to talk about. So, you know, they run a tight ship. That's just, only thing I can say is that has to come from the top. It's just the way he likes it.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, my experience in this is not really that extent because I have not gone to a practice yet. I will say this. If they didn't want stuff like that getting leaked out, I think there'd be like zero media access. You know, and that's just my unbiased opinion outside looking in. And it could be different once I get there. Who knows? But the way that I see it is, look, if they didn't want something out there, then the media would have zero access. There's nothing that I'm going to write about that a talent acquisition guy at a different program is not going to be like, you know what? I didn't think much about CJ Carr until Trevor Trowbridge wrote about him. We should probably look at, you know what I mean? I don't think it's going to be anything like that. So that's a good question, though.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Ronnie Reeves, who is your favorite movie character? Mine is Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday and Heath Ledger as the Joker.
Ooh. Pacino as Michael Corleone is one. Sean Connery as James Bond is another one. Heck, Sean Connery in a lot. Sean Connery in The Rock. Eddie Murphy in a couple of movies. It's definitely Chris Tucker in Friday. It's like, man. Harrison Ford in The Fugitive. Tommy Lee Jones in The Fugitive. Harrison Ford in Air Force One. Heck, Harrison Ford in Star Wars.
Yep.
Yeah, you can tell Harrison Ford is one of my favorite actors.
Yep, Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones.
Denzel and Training Day. Remember the Titans. I mean, look, that's tough, man. Oh, what's the kid's name? Oh, man. Primal Fear. What's his name? Richard Gere was the attorney, but he was defending, what's that actor's name, man? That was one of the best acting jobs. Man. He's a pretty well-known actor, too. He's much older now. Edward Norton, yes. Edward Norton was phenomenal in Primal Fear. Absolutely phenomenal. Have you seen that?
I'll have to check it out. I'm a big movie buff, so I like hearing about movies that I haven't seen yet.
Oh, Al Pacino in Devil's Advocate. Oh, man, that was an incredible performance by Al Pacino, especially that next to last scene with him and Keanu Reeves. Fantastic. I'm being monogamous. Yeah, I'm being chauvinistic. So when you say actor, I'm thinking about. Let me think about some female actors that have done some incredible jobs too. That pulled a couple of tears down my cheeks.
Favorite movie characters? For me, I think of like, not from a plot perspective, but like if that character was like portrayed differently or like not in the movie, it'd be different. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or like I couldn't see anybody else playing that character. I guess if that makes sense.
I could definitely, if that's the case, Heath Ledger as the Joker was, man.
That's what I'm saying. Like that's how I took this question, because it's like as a character, because like there's been so many characters that have been like done so many times, you know, that it's like I have no idea who to pick from that. I mean, it's hard to imagine anybody else playing like Tony Stark and Iron Man than RDJ. Like he kind of embodies that one. Heath Ledger's the Joker's a good one. Honestly, it's hard for me to picture anybody else besides Sylvester Stallone being able to play Rocky. I don't know who else would have been able to pull that off. I think he embodied that one pretty well.
Yeah, that's why I said I can't see anybody else playing Michael Corleone.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah, there's some good ones, though.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can't
Good
see
question,
anybody
Ronnie.
playing that. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, man. I saw the new Captain America, man. I need Chris Evans, man. I'm like, hey, and I like Anthony Mackie, but I'm like, all right, Chris Evans is just kind of like seared into my brain, man. And like, yeah,
I'm with you.
Robert Downey is definitely. I can't see anybody else playing Iron Man.
No.
No one else.
No. Couldn't.
A matter of fact, I'm gonna be honest. And now that I've seen it, I don't know if I couldn't even see anybody else playing Kang. They would have to bring
No. Jonathan Majors back.
Jonathan Majors back.
I was so upset when all that stuff went down. I love Jonathan
Man.
Majors. He was that next guy coming up.
Yeah.
There's a movie on Netflix called The Harder They Fall.
Okay.
And it's a Western setting. It has a
Yeah,
very like Django Unchained,
Yeah.
like Tarantino type feel.
I know exactly. I haven't seen it, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Man, if you got any free time this weekend, watch that movie, man, because it's fantastic. Jonathan Majors is awesome in it. Idris Elba's in it. The whole cast is awesome.
Yeah.
The whole cast is spectacular.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite movies. But yeah, I couldn't see anybody else as that. I couldn't see anybody else but Josh Brolin voicing Thanos.
Yes.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Very iconic. Yeah. I'm with that. I'm with you. Question in here from Conrad. If you could have one Notre Dame guy back from the draft with one extra year of eligibility, who would you bring back and why?
See, that's hard, man, because I'm the type of guy. Shout out to LL Cool J. I was ready for, man, I love Aldrich Estimate, but I was so ready to see Jeremiah Love. It was like, all right, Aldrich, thank you, but go ahead. I love Xavier Watts, but I'm ready to see, I'm ready to see the young talent, man. Like, I'm just ready to see the young talent. I'm ready to see it. Heck, I would love if Riley Leonard came back for a second year, but you know what? I'm ready to see these youngsters. Riley Mills. Because he got hurt during the playoff. Yeah. I would want him to come back for one more ride.
Yep. Me too. Riley Mills was mine.
Yep.
Yeah. Riley Mills would be mine because I know some people in the chat, like, they've thrown in some names. I've heard people talk about it before, like BMO. But one of the reasons why Ben Morrison was so okay with leaving is because he saw the room that he was leaving behind.
You think?
And so it's one of the biggest questions on the team right now is who's going to line up at defensive tackle. If Riley Mills was able to pick up where he left off, man,
yeah,
that would be something awesome. That would be something awesome. Brian did ask one more question in here. It says, let's say Malachi Fields repeats his 23 and 24 performance, and Greathouse is a 50-catch, 700-yard guy. Who would you want to emerge as the third option, and why?
Don't they already have a third option? I just don't see Jordan Faison going anywhere. Heck, in the start of the playoff, he was the first option until Jaden Greathouse came on. So I just don't see Jordan Faison going anywhere, but just in the spirit of the question, I'm going to selfishly say Micah Gilbert.
That's a good one.
I know you're going to go KK, right?
Mm-mm.
Okay, you're going, okay. I thought I had you pegged. Trev?
Nope. I'm going to say Cam Williams.
Okay.
For some of the similar reasons as KK Smith, but I'll say that KK Smith, I got to see him stay healthy, man.
Mm-hmm.
I do. And I think Cam Williams can be an impact player for years to come. Not that KK Smith can't, but they need a guy that can stretch the field vertically.
Yeah.
Like a true burner. Jordan Faison is more quick than he is fast. Malachi Fields has decent speed, but he's like a Miles Boykin type. He's a Chase Claypool type where he can make plays down the field, but it's mostly like once he makes that catch at 25 yards, he's going down at 30.
Yeah.
Jaden Greathouse had some skill after the catch, but he's not a burner.
Right.
Mine would be Cam Williams. Like, he's somebody that if he gets behind the defense, he's gone. Like, similar to how we talked about Jay Love and J.D. Price, that once the defense saw taillights, that was it. Strike up the band.
Yeah.
And Cam Williams has that factor, but he's somebody that for down the road, especially 2025 and beyond, I would love to see it be Cam Williams. Because then Notre Dame would be in a spot this upcoming season, 2026, where it's like, okay, they got Greathouse coming back. They got Williams coming back. Ideally, to your point, Micah Gilbert somewhere in that mix too. Yeah, that'd be me.
Yeah.
I'll answer a couple of salties in here pretty quickly. He has one. How far will Notre Dame go in the men's ACC basketball tournament?
When is the first game? And who do they play? It's all about who they play. If they play Stanford again, ladies and gents, these are the wildernesses you have to endure to get to the promised land that is next year when they get a more talented team.
Yes.
On campus.
I have a lot of respect for what Shrewsbury's done the past year. I mean, they made the ACC tournament last year. They won a game. They beat somebody in the first round. Then they lost to Wake Forest pretty bad in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on who they draw, maybe they make it to the second round. It really depends on who they draw. I'm going to be honest with you. And a lot of Notre Dame's losses, they've been close. Outside of when they played Clemson, like they've had some close losses, but it hasn't like it's.
And see, that's the frustration, right? Somebody asked me a question. No, I remember somebody saying, maybe it's in the chat, I'm off of Coach Shrewsbury. And I'm like, based upon what? I'm like, did you think this was going to be like an instant turnaround? Like, I think people want teams instead of programs. It takes time to build programs. And when you have a guy that's actually committed to building a program and just not putting together teams year to year, you have to do you know we had to suffer to get the 2024 National Championship campaign? We had to suffer embarrassment to Northern Illinois, Marshall. But Marcus Freeman was consistent in his message. He was unwavering. And it yielded one of the greatest seasons in Notre Dame history, or at least recent history. And so it's the same thing with Coach Shrewsbury, man. People wanted Marcus Freeman. They're talking about Marcus Freeman, man, on the hot seat after Northern Illinois. Next thing you know, he's winning every Coach of the Year award. Every postseason Coach of the Year award. It's like Marcus Freeman. So this year, it's a tough one, man. It's a tough one. I think Coach Shrews will have a lot of time to start prepping for the portal and a lot of other things while he watches March Madness take place.
Recruiting basketball, everybody talks about recruiting football at Notre Dame, but like just based on the standards of when you can leave college basketball, I would make the argument that recruiting basketball at Notre Dame is harder than recruiting football. The only reason why I say that is because at Notre Dame,
on the men's side,
okay, yes, because you could make the argument that it's like, look, a lot of men's basketball players look to come in and be one and dones. Like the teams that are perennially like making runs in the March Madness tournament, they know those 18, 19-year-old freshmen won't be on the team most likely the following season. There's been like very few that like have returned, like Jaden Ivey when he was at Purdue came back for his sophomore season, but that's rare in my opinion. But a lot of the benefits that Notre Dame has at recruiting for football is like, hey, look, like you can come and you can be in an early enrollee and you can work to get your degree by the time you leave if you break out and are draft eligible after your junior season. But for Notre Dame basketball, it's so tough for them to attract that type of recruits. Like, hey, you come here and get your degree. It's like, look, dude, I plan on being in college for a year. Like the Cooper Flags of the world I find it hard for them to be like, yes, I will go to Notre Dame. You're going to have to find a kid that's willing to either buy into it and say, like, look, I'm going to go to a program that perennially has struggled over the last, 10 years since their back-to-back Elite Eight and Sweet 16 run. And even that was filled with a bunch of veterans. Pat Connaughton, Jaron Grant, all those guys. None of those players were one and dones. Even Demetrius Jackson was there for 2 seasons. Yeah. 3 seasons, actually. And so it's just one of those where it's like, I think that's where Notre Dame men's basketball is handicapped. They're just going to have to go through waves of like, maybe not so waves, because once Shrewsbury gets his feet under him with building a program, I think it's going to start to roll a little bit. But you're going to have to get some classes that are bought into like turning the program around, and they won't accept. They're just going to accept the fact that they won't be those high caliber one and dones. That's kind of how I view the men's basketball recruiting, at least.
Dude, that Elite Eight matchup they had with Kentucky, that was one of my favorite games.
That game was nuts.
That game was nuts. They played their tails off.
Only lost by 2.
I know. They played their tails off. And I'm like, yo, are they going to pull this off?
Man, I thought about it. That lineup was insane, though. I mean, Kentucky's lineup that game, they had the twins at guard.
Twins, Cat.
Yep. What's his name? Willie Cauley-Stein. And then was Michael Kidd-Gilchrist their 3?
No. Or Kid Gilchrist was he was with AD. He was with Anthony Davis.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know
who was that 5. The twins. Oh, what was the other kid? No, he didn't play because he tore his knee up in the middle. Pothris, Alex Pothris. He tore his ACL because he didn't play. Because they lost to Wisconsin in the Final Four, right? Yes. They ended up losing to Wisconsin in the Final Four, and then Wisconsin lost to Duke in the national championship game. Yeah, I don't know who that starting 5 was. Poultris was hurt. Twins.
Was it? Booker was on that team too.
He was the 6th man. Devin Booker was the 6th man. That's
crazy. Was it Trey Lyles?
Trey Lyles. Yes, Trey Lyles was
I mean, that team had Aaron Harrison, Andrew Harrison, Devin Booker, Karl Anthony Towns, Willie Cauley-Stein, Trey Lyles.
Yes.
Whatever. That's so crazy.
That's crazy. That was crazy. That was one of the best games I've seen. That was one of the best Elite Eight games I've seen.
Another question in here from Salty Virginia Peanuts. How remarkable is it that Zach Martin has more Pro Bowl appearances than holding calls over his career? It's insane.
Hey, man, I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked at all.
No.
That's an incredible stat.
Oh, it's one of the more impressive sports stats that I've heard. Zach Martin, I mean, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, in my opinion, as an interior offensive lineman. I mean, he's one of the best to have done it. Dude's insane. Absolutely insane. Question in here from Mark Avalone. Did it surprise you how quickly Jalen Smith's career tailed off? Why do you think it did?
Injury.
Yep.
Catastrophic knee injury. And that's crazy, man, because now you remember, well, I'm older than you, Travis. So 15 years ago, man, ACL was like, it's a wrap. It's a wrap. Now you hear ACL and you like, okay, he'll be back. But there are so many nuances too. When they get in there, they can diagnose you with it, but then when they get in there, it can be worse, it could be better than they thought. You just never know, what other cartilage damage. You know, and then it depends on the type of knee you have, right? My dad used to tell me all the time, like my dad was a state champion in wrestling. He played shortstop, baseball. Like my dad was athlete, point guard, basketball. My brother's, man, got his genes. I was athletic, but I wasn't as athletic as they were. And my dad used to tell me like, yo, you got tight knees. So I would never be the guy that would be out there doing like crazy Euro steps. You know what I'm saying? Like, and if I tore my ACL, it'd probably be more devastating than say if it was my dad or my brother that had more flexible knee joints. You know what I'm saying? So it just depends on the person. Like every ACL is not the same. And so I think he just had one of those catastrophic knee injuries, man. That he just wasn't able to get back to that level.
Which is tough. Yeah, which is tough because he entered the league at a time where like linebackers needed to be a little faster, needed to be able to cover people a little bit more. That's what I said was the kind of the ailment to Manti Te'o's career. Is he entered the league at a time where it's like the bigger, heavier, like 6'2", 6'3", 250-pound linebackers were starting to fade.
Yeah.
Because they had to cover slots. They had to cover tight ends. If Manti Te'o was drafted in like 2002, he would have had a really awesome career.
Oh, man, he should have come to the Bears in the 90s. He would have been perfect. The 80s and 90s. He should have taken over from Mike Singletary. He would have been perfect.
But, yeah, with Jalen Smith, it was injuries. But he had like, 4 or 5 seasons with over 100 tackles with the Cowboys. It's just his knee injuries made him lose a step, shaved a couple years off of his career. But you're right. You brought something up. I mean, the recovery from ACLs is wild if you think about it. I remember back when Adrian Peterson recovered from his in like 10, 11 months, and everybody's like, this guy's Superman. He's a freak. I mean, Mitchell Evans came back from his ACL after 9 months and played against Texas A&M. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tore my ACL in college. It's not fun.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, bro.
Yeah, man. And
I'm sorry to hear that.
You want to talk about the different types of knees. I was not a fast person before the ACL. Now, I mean, if I ran the 40, if I'm under 7 seconds, yeah. I would probably be under 7 seconds. But it's man, I'll say this. The rehab was worse than tearing it.
That's what I hear. That's exactly what I heard. That's that the rehab. My daughter's going through rehab now for a minor ankle injury, and she texted me yesterday like, "Oh my God!"
Oh, it's
like the therapist is killing me right now. It's like, yeah.
Like my knee, it's weird because like it has like a negative degree almost.
Okay.
So like if my fingernails are my kneecap and like this is straight, my knees kind of come back a little bit.
Okay.
So then what I had to do for my, like literally the first 3 weeks of my rehab is I just had to put my like foot up on a pillow and then just like gravity do its work and like get my knee back to where it was. This was the worst part. Just stretching it out. It was awful. Yeah.
So is it true? I heard Derrick Rose echo the same thing right recently. And he said the worst was when they finally got him on the bike and they would make him pedal forward and then make him pedal backwards, you know, just to start getting like flexibility back in his knee. He was talking about how painful it was just to do that, right? Because you were just trying to get your knee back to be able to walk and do normal things. Like it's even more intense, I would guess, to get it back to being that same athletic level and strength that you needed to be.
I mean, and it was tough too because like I was very active in college, still am now. Like love to play, you know, like rec league volleyball. I still like to play basketball, you know. But it's after kind of the first part because then rehab in months like 3 through 6 were fine. Like it was just building the strength back, dude. Having to get back to having to like be able to trust it again was so hard.
Yeah,
I mean, because it's just. Yeah, man.
Yeah. Man, look, plenty of ankle, separated shoulders, things of that nature. I'm so glad I stayed away from that knee. That's a split ear. I had a bunch of injuries, but
Oh yeah, I've I've broken my fibula. It's like the non-weight bearing bone in your ankle.
yeah.
I've sprained my ankle a bunch. I've broken a rib before.
Hmm.
ACL takes the cake, and it literally wasn't even the tearing it part. It was the rehab was. I said this when I was going through rehab. I'd rather just tear it again.
So was it? They say you hear a pop.
I felt it
You felt it?
instantly. Yeah,
Oh man.
yeah. It was non-contact. I was playing intramural flag football, and I was running, and I made a cut, and I didn't like sink my hips low enough. So they basically said that like when I planted my foot in the ground and turned so fast, I basically just tore it.
Oh man.
And then when I felt it immediately, I just felt to go. And then like I went into shock initially because I was just kind of like sitting there, and I was like, all right, I've never felt that before.
Right.
That ain't right. And I sat there for a second. Then like all my buddies came over to help me up. They're like, yeah, let's go. And I was like, hold on, let me sit here for a second. I gotta. And then it swelled up almost instantly. Yeah, it was awesome. Yep. Another question in here from Aiden Benami. Will Jeremiah Love average 18 plus touches this year compared to his 16 this past year? Off the bat, I would say so. I mean, some of his touches started to get limited towards the tail end of the postseason too because he was hurt, missed the second half of USC, and I think he's going to be more active in the pass game.
Yeah. And Riley Leonard's not taking touches.
Also true.
From all the guys, really.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely average over 18 for sure. John A1, which offense do you believe would be more effective at Notre Dame? Offense number one produces 275 passing yards and 165 rushing yards per game, or offense number two is 220 passing yards, 220 rushing yards per game.
I think that's game to game.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Regular season option 2, I'm fine with, especially with a first-time starting quarterback. I'm fine with them putting up 220. Perfectly fine with them putting up 220 a game. Heck, I would have wanted 220 a game this year.
Man,
please give me 220 passing this year. But
I think at one point in the season, especially before the Stanford game, I think if Notre Dame averaged 220 passing yards a game, that would have been like 35 yards above their per game average. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. But like you said, Trevor, once you get to the playoffs at 275, there's going to be a need for that 275.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you even just look at it in big games. I mean, Brian and I have talked about this game before, but when Oregon played Ohio State, Jordan James for Oregon had 2 rushing touchdowns, and like he, I guess, only had 155 yards on the ground. But when we're talking about a big game in a situation like that 155 rushing yards against a defense like Ohio State is a lot more impactful than, say, only rushing for 155 yards against Stanford.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would say more effective in the postseason would be offense number one, more effective throughout the regular season's offense number two. Because especially after their first bye week, Notre Dame essentially did that. Pass for 220, rush for 220. Because Riley Leonard didn't put up a bunch of stats, but then like when Steve would come in, they would still throw.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so there were a good amount of games, especially after the first bye week, that Notre Dame ended with more than 200 yards passing. It's just, Riley would have 180 of it, and then Steve would have like 40 of it. And so they were relatively close to that. Let's see, Irishman 7114. Rank these teams in order of how much you'd love to see Notre Dame have a home and home with them. Gosh, we got Iowa, Nebraska, Oregon, Tennessee, BYU, Michigan, Texas, Penn State, SMU, and Ole Miss.
Okay. Irishman. I don't want to see Iowa, Nebraska. I've already seen BYU. SMU is on the way because of the ACC schedule. Ole Miss, Tennessee I would love because I was That was like the beginning of my fandom when they had the home and home against Tennessee. And Tennessee is an absolute beautiful venue to play college football. Michigan, I always love the Michigan rivalry. So Oregon would be cool. So I'll go Texas. I'll go Texas, Tennessee. No, Texas, Michigan, Tennessee, Oregon, Penn State, SMU, and then you could do whatever with the rest.
I'm with you. For me, if I'm going to schedule a home and home, if I'm looking at somebody in Notre Dame's like administration department, whoever puts those schedules together, I would want to schedule a home and home with somebody that like does something for me, like moves the schedule forward or something. You know, I don't know how much scheduling a home and home with Nebraska. I don't know what that would do for Notre Dame. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I guess you could have the whole like 2 blue blood programs. I mean, what's Nebraska done in the last 20 years? You know, like, I mean, I guess, but yeah, I mean, if I had to pick the top ones that I'd like to see, because I don't know if I could put these in order, I'd love to see a home and home with Michigan again. I loved that rivalry. I did. I think once every 5 years, Notre Dame should do a home and home with Texas. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Get down south, play in front of them. Tennessee, I would just like to see a game inside of Neyland Stadium. I think that'd be cool.
Man, you and me both.
That'd be awesome. When's the last time they had a home and home? Was it 04, 05?
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a while. Matter of fact, I think the last Nebraska 99, 2000 or 2000, 2001 was Nebraska. Home and home. I don't think they've had an Oregon. The Texas one was 15 and 16.
15, 16. Penn State, the last home and home was 06, 07.
That was the Darren Walls pick 6 game at Penn State. Yeah.
Let's see here, Peter. Okay, I'll address this one real quick here, Peter. We've talked about it a lot on the show. Brian's brought it up a lot of times. We don't like to put anything out there of players who could potentially transfer, regardless if it would be a surprise to anybody or regardless of if it would, you know, we don't like to put that out there. I know that's something that Brian kind of holds strong to. So if transfers do happen after spring, because most likely they will, because they will have scholarship numbers to get to, we'll address it at that time. But I know Brian doesn't like to speculate. Neither do I about just who could potentially leave. And so, but I didn't want you to think that we didn't see or address a question. So that's where we're at with that one, man. All righty. John A1. Is it possible for Notre Dame to improve its ability to maintain its level of play in 2025 if the 2025 team experienced an equivalent loss of talent due to injury?
It depends on where the injuries are. If they lost the starting quarterback instead of the starting left tackle, I think the team is equipped to handle that. I think that actually, I'd say it again, to have those veterans that you had as backups on the offensive line, and for both of them to transfer out, that's, people might be underselling that a little bit. I know it's a talented room, but your backups don't really have the playing experience that you had coming off the bench and the leadership that you had coming off the bench. You don't need injuries on the interior of that defensive line. You just don't.
No.
You just don't.
D-line for me as a whole is probably the one position group, that and wide receiver. Wide receiver and D-line are the two that I think that would be pretty devastating. Because you go and you think, like, yes, I know corner. I would hear out arguments for that. But, God forbid if one of the starters get hurt, then you have Carson Hobbs, Cree Thomas is already there in the spring. Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary.
They got some dudes at
Johnson's
defensive
good.
back though.
I know.
they got some dudes.
That's what I'm saying. To where it's just like, look,
They have some dudes.
Mm-hmm. I think safety is another one that's kind of on the fence. Linebackers loaded. Offensively, I think it should, like, if the wide receiving that or tight end. If the tight end room suffers any more injuries, that could be interesting.
Yeah. It's just certain areas. It's just certain areas where you would be like, oh man.
The D line would be rough. That would be bad. But yeah, that's where I'm at. All righty, we only have a couple more in here, so we'll run through these real quick here. DJ, the big conferences have changed the way they schedule. Do you think we will see more surprise teams challenging the top of the conferences like IU or Arizona State?
I'm very interested in seeing how IU, because IU is trying to make inroads in places like Chicago. They offered Mikael Blade. They offered a couple of Chicago kids. I'm sure they're up in Indianapolis, going after top kids at like Warren Central and other schools. I'm interested in seeing how they're recruiting. I know what they can do in the portal. I want to see what they can do from a recruiting standpoint. Arizona State, Kenny Dillingham has it smoking. He has them smoking. So I'll be very interested if Arizona State can become the flag bearer of that conference.
The Big 12's up for grabs right now, man. Like, there's no team that I look at that it's like, okay, who's it going to be?
Like, if they can go back to back and kind of become that team every year.
Be interesting.
Yeah.
Do I think we'll see it? I think it's more likely in the ACC and the Big 12 than it would be the SEC or the Big 10, just by how the conferences are put together. Do I think we'll see some surprise teams? Yeah. But even if you go through and you think about our conversation from earlier, the surprise teams in the SEC we said might be on like the bubble to make the playoffs, but a surprise team in the ACC or the Big 12 might have the opportunity to win the conference. Florida's a surprise team potentially for me in the SEC, but I don't think they're going to win the SEC. Not with that schedule. And also having to beat probably one of Texas or Georgia or maybe Alabama in the conference championship. I don't know if they have that in them, especially after playing what will most likely be 6 ranked teams in the regular season. I think IU could be another surprise team this year in the Big 10. Do I think that they beat Ohio State or Penn State or Oregon?
It's kind of shocking, more teams, shall I say, on the Big 10 side. I thought one sport would probably have more of an impact when you talk about football and basketball, but the traditional powers have held serve in both football and basketball in the Big 10. Like the impact of bringing those programs over. You had Oregon, who was a top 5 program anyway, so they came over and did what they did, but you still had Ohio State, Penn State, the traditional powers. Illinois jumped up in there. And then the teams like USC, UCLA, Washington, they kind of struggled. Same thing in basketball. Oregon's come on late, but it's pretty much been the same Big 10 teams as always. SEC was a little bit different because Oklahoma has struggled, but Oklahoma was struggling before they came into the SEC. I don't know why they felt like the SEC was going to change things. It only gets more difficult. And Texas was already ascending before they came to the SEC. So the more you think things would change, the more they stay the same. It seems like from a conference standpoint.
Honestly.
So, yeah.
Yeah, honestly. I got a couple in here left from Salty Virginia Peanuts. First one, how likely are we to see Brennan Vernon play this season?
That's up to the kid.
Mm-hmm.
That's up to the kid, man. That's up to the kid.
Ideally, a good amount. Rotate in. I would personally like to see him play off the edge because I think that's where he projects better. But
I think I would agree with you. I don't need to see. I'll be honest. Outside of injuries, there's nothing worse than taking a kid that's played on the edge his entire high school career, and then wasting a year of him trying to figure out how to play in a confined space while adding weight.
Yeah.
Everybody can. Even Riley Mills started out playing on the outside.
Yeah.
To get him comfortable, and then made the transition.
Yeah. And with Riley Mills, he was just one of those guys that just outgrew the edge position.
Yeah.
I mean, just before you knew it, the dude was, 290 pounds. And so it's just like, all right, well, don't know if we really want him playing off the edge, especially in a 4-3 defense or a 4-2-5 defense. Yeah, you got to move him inside.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you. This one real quick, Salty. Will there be another set of episodes tracking the Irish throughout this season? I don't think so. I looked into this. I saw when you put this question in. I didn't see anything that Peacock was renewing the Here Come the Irish series, which, it was an awesome inside look, but it even typically, it was a very Hard Knocks type of vibe to this. It was set up very similarly, and Hard Knocks doesn't even go back to the same team, year over year. So I haven't seen anything. Would I be upset about it from a fan standpoint? No, but from a football standpoint, I'm not upset that they're not doing it.
I actually would be thinking it would be dope if they did spring and fall camp.
Yeah.
Installments.
That would be cool.
That'd be cool. Because to me, the best version of that is the NFL off the season version that they do.
Yeah.
Right? That gives you behind the scenes of free agency, the draft, and that was because I think they followed the Giants last year, and you got to see the entire Saquon Barkley thing. That Hard Knocks was amazing. Sorry guys, because the Bears were absolutely it was boring. I apologize. It was the worst Hard Knocks in the history of Hard Knocks. It was terrible. But I would love to see a Notre Dame off season.
That'd be really cool.
Getting the new guys in, seeing their workouts, spring ball, portal opening. And man, that would be dope. That would be absolutely dope if they did that. Even if they just did it in 2 or 3 episodes, that would be dope.
Yeah, I'm with you. Aiden Benami. We can lose, not saying we will, to Miami and Texas A&M and still make the playoffs. I think we go 12-0 for the record.
Man, I talk that talk, man. We're not losing to Miami. These are trash, man. Carson Beck is trash. That's the same energy. Everybody would tell you that's the same energy I had for Texas A&M. I was like, dude, Connor Wegman is trash. I don't want to hear it. He's trash. We're going to smack them. I said we're going to win by 10. Look, they're trash. That's just the way I look at it. They're trash. Carson Beck is trash. We saw he was trash. If he played with Georgia, we would smack them even worse. That's gonna Stockton saved them from 2 interceptions we would have had.
Yeah, that's facts.
If Carson Beck had played.
Yep.
That's the energy I'm on, Notre Dame fans. That's just me. You don't have to be on that energy. I'm on that time.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. I don't think we lose to Miami either. But per this scenario, I'll say this. I watched Ohio State lose to a 6-5 Michigan team at home in the final week of the regular season, and they still hosted. That's what I'll say. So a lot of the playoff rankings just kind of comes down to who and what happens around you. If Notre Dame loses back-to-back games and rattles off 10 straight, and they're able to be somewhere in the realm of, 9 to 11 in the final rankings, and yeah, I think they still make the playoffs. Again, it just depends on what happens around you, though. I've said this, and I said this last year when it came down to it. If Alabama didn't drop that 21-point road loss to Oklahoma somehow, and if Ole Miss didn't lose to – who'd they lose to late in the year?
Kentucky?
I think so.
Kentucky? Yeah.
And then if Miami didn't drop to Georgia Tech, all of those happened in the month of November. Ohio State's not hosting a home playoff game.
And Miami lost to Syracuse, too.
And Miami, yeah. So all of those things happened in the month of November. You know, if 2 of those 4 things didn't happen, I don't know if Ohio State hosts. You know, so I still think that we would have made the playoffs, but if all of that stuff didn't happen before their final regular season home loss, and it was like an ugly loss, like not an embarrassing loss, but it's just, or not, when I mean not an embarrassing loss, I mean it wasn't a 30 ball.
Right.
You know, if they're still able to lose a game like that and still host a home playoff game, I think Notre Dame would be fine at 10-2.
Yeah. And the schedule helps out even more this year with the loss than it did last year.
Yeah, because last year it was different. I mean, you lose to a team like Northern Illinois, you can't afford another.
Can't lose anymore, yeah.
But, I mean, both Miami and Texas A&M are going to be ranked in the preseason. I don't know where, but I would be shocked if either of them weren't. I mean, even if they start their season with back-to-back ranked losses, then, you know.
Yo, is Marcus Freeman's winning percentage better against Power 4 teams?
I feel like it has to be.
He lost to Marshall, Northern Illinois.
I think those are his only 2 non-Power 4.
Are those his only 2? The other one was to Stanford and Ohio State. Okay.
Yeah.
And Clemson. Yeah. Okay.
Louisville.
I know he struck. Dude, Notre Dame played their worst games against MAC teams this year. That's crazy. That's absolutely insane. That is insane.
Well, it was an adjustment, bro, because we were sitting here talking about, like, the previous regime, it was, can they win the big game? I didn't have a lot of questions around Marcus Freeman winning a big game.
Yeah.
Eventually, right? Because, like, Brian Kelly never gave me a lot of hope that he was going to win that big game. You know? But, like, even with Marcus Freeman, like in the losses to Ohio State in 22 and 23, it was like, it's going to come. I know it will at some point because you can see it. My issue with Marcus Freeman was like, can we not lose to Mac School? Can we not lose to 22 Stanford? Can we not lose to Clemson with 9 starters out?
Oh, I don't care what anybody says. We just lost in the national championship game. I'm sorry, man. That 2023 Ohio State game is still the toughest loss to Ohio State. We just lost to them in the national championship game.
Oh, yeah.
That 23 game at home?
I was there. I was in the stands. And the last 5 minutes of that fourth quarter, I've never had just more of a roller coaster of emotions in my life. In my life.
I mean, you had the game. Had it multiple times.
You needed a first down.
Oh. Yeah. And that sounds crazy because, like, you just lost in the national championship game, but
yeah.
That hurt the most out of the 3.
Yep. Could not agree more. Last one in here is from our guy, Salty Virginia Peanuts. Will Bronte Johnson or Kennedy Urlacher have the more impressive spring performance?
What are we talking? Tackles or interceptions? Because it comes to hits, Kennedy Urlacher is going to he's going to be evident every practice. I can guarantee you that.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, he's laying the wood.
Yeah, he's downhill, man. He is who he is. Tay in coverage, sometimes it's, I think Tay is definitely going to show himself well.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. Kennedy's going to have to build on his coverage skill set this spring. And then Tay, some of it with Tay Johnson is just finding him a permanent home. You know, Is he going to be working out of the nickel? Is he going to be working out at the corner spot? Is he going to be working out at the safety spot? It's one of the things that I'm looking forward to hearing when spring kind of starts to break out fully.
Yeah, I can see Kennedy being like a specialist right now. Goal line, short.
He's going to be Weapon X when they play Navy this year.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I'll tell you that right now. Kennedy Urlacher might have 15 tackles against Navy this year.
Man. Oh, he's definitely the alley guy.
Yeah. When number 23 is on the field on defense, don't throw any bubble screens. Don't throw any tosses. Yeah.
Man.
Well, Mr. Davis, that's going to do it. That's going to do it for the Friday free-for-all mailbag. Thank you guys so much. We had a lot of really good submissions today, a lot of really good conversations. Brian will be back next week, and we will have a lot more content coming out your way. The show schedule will be a little bit back to normal. I'm a little sad, though, man. I got to do a lot of shows with Sean this week, and that was a lot of fun. So,
man, Trev, it was a pleasure.
Yeah.
And have a great birthday, Lauren. Have a great birthday.
Appreciate that. It is on my to-do list. I wrote it down right after I brought it up, as I gotta plan something. So don't worry, we'll be doing something fun for the birthday. But until then, guys, you guys know what to do. Please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. Whatever streaming platform you guys watch us on, whether it's Spotify podcasts or Apple Podcasts, we'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review. And as always, the best way to support what we do here, subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Have a fun and safe weekend. For Sean Davis, I'm Trevor Trowbridge. We will see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.